Hello, this is Walter Bradley, and this is Heart Talk. I'm here with Greg Fernandez Jr., and we're here to talk about a case tonight called the Crowley case of Minnesota, Apple Valley. And we noticed some incongruity or some problems with the facts, with the conclusions of the Apple Valley Police Department. We don't know why it went this way, but it was described that he killed his daughter, that's David Crowley, his wife, and tried to kill the dog, they assume. And he was found 3 weeks after the alleged events. And I'm here with Greg, and we're here to just kind of delve into this. And Greg, why don't you update our listeners and tell them a little bit about this case in case no one has heard of it, and your conclusions based on Catherine Michelle, her investigation, and your investigation. Go ahead, Greg, let us know.
Well, I would say I'm still looking into this. I still haven't come to a conclusion where I think that, David is innocent or he's guilty. I'm still open to the possibility that David Crowley is guilty, but there is just nothing there that would lead me to even think that David Crowley is guilty, basically. So that's been the problem that I've had. And the only other logical thing is, well, okay, if it wasn't David, then it must have been somebody else, right?
Yes.
But I can't say that I have a conclusion on this. I have a couple working theories. One of the working theories is probably one of the most outrageous things that you'll hear, and it does involve David being guilty. And that working theory is that he was possessed by a demon, went crazy, and killed himself. Okay, that's one working theory. That's the only logical theory, the only logical thing that I can find for any reason that David Crowley is guilty. That's it. And even that really doesn't make sense. That is the only way that I can logically put it into my brain that the police covered this up. Because aren't there other cases that we've seen where ghost sightings, where people have been taken over by demons? And I do believe there are other cases that fit that standard where the police cover it up because they don't want to look crazy. I think the biggest thing is that I would ask is for everybody just to do the research on your own. Don't think that just because I think something that everybody else should too. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm trying to convince myself of one way or the other. Was David Crowley guilty? Was he, did he snap? All that stuff. And I've gone through it all. And I go back and forth, but it all comes down to the same thing. There is no meat there. There is nothing there that should lead anybody to think that David Crowley is guilty. The Apple Valley police have a conclusion that because they don't see any evidence of anybody else, that it must be David. That's not good. That's not a good way to solve a case. I've never heard of that. Every cop, every person that I've shown this so far, they all have the same look. They are just dumbfounded, like, what the heck? It always starts, it's a three-phase thing. I start telling them this, they start asking me questions, they kind of get silent, they're very stumped by it, and then they don't want to talk about it. And I think that's going to be a big, big problem, because if there's other outside cops that don't want to talk about it, how much more likely is it that the Apple Valley police don't want to talk about it? So I know that's a long-winded answer without really giving you an answer, all to come back and just say, as far as a conclusion, at this point, I do not have one.
Okay. Now, I'm going to chime in a little bit and put some perspective from my side. And one of the things that I agree with you is that he could be guilty. But all of the evidence that would support that, I don't see it. Not that it could not be true, but just the condition of his body, the body's layout, and what I saw and the evidence that Catherine Michelle brought produced a lot of doubt in me that he did do it. Now, you brought up the interesting aspect that it was a spiritual related thing. Herein is something that most people, and it's very rare, wouldn't believe, but is a very minute, very small percentage, 0.001001. It'd be infinitesimal in its likelihood. However, there are things that interact in this world, spiritual, that motivate people or can control or infill them momentarily, so to speak, spirit beings, or that can appear and act in the physical realm of our earth. Now, this has happened before, but it's very rare. And the point being that could it have been something that happened that they did find evidence of, but were not in a position to say, oh yeah, it was an evil spirit apparition that appeared and we found evidence that it slaughtered them. Well, that's not something that plays in the newscast, and neither would it go over in a public sense because that's a biblical thing. And they don't get much good in their minds of putting that out there. They best would have said, like many in the military, let's just keep this under wraps. We'll make it an obvious thing of it isn't this, but we're going to say it is and shut up. People will disagree and say we're in collusion and that he was murdered. Yeah, okay, let them do it. But we're just going to take the rap, and whoever goes up on it, we'll talk to the Attorney General, let them know the situation, and we'll keep a cap on this because we don't want to talk about this. That is one scenario. Or it was a government-involved agent setup, clandestine setup through the government, which was made to eliminate him and his project so it did not see the light of day, which has more veracity than my previous. So I personally don't believe he was responsible for this action that occurred to his family or himself. That's me. I'm open to be corrected on that if there is irrefutable evidence to the contrary. So, in that same vein, it is a very tenuous job for anybody who's looking into that case, because I think certain officers who didn't know would want to look into it until they found out what it is or what it was, and then maybe then they go, oops, you're right, I'm going silent. And that's kind of my take on it. There's a lot of things we're not seeing here that have not been revealed, and I don't think we have all the facts about this case. I think we have evidence that was presented and allowed to free float through the internet and through different people, which indicates it was not David Crowley. However, they say it was. So the thing comes to mind is, now here's the strange case of the body double. One that looks like Crowley that is not Crowley. Could there be an inference to that? I don't know. But body doubles are not infrequent in the world. I have one somewhere. That would be hard to tell the difference unless you knew me. If David Crowley, being a former military person, he would know ways to defend himself. And yet they kill his daughter, and I assume before they killed him, or maybe the order of death was not established. It could have been he was killed first and then his family as witnesses of that. So in that, we have that. What is the order of death? They could not establish that, and I see that as a problem also. And in this, they don't know, so they have to assume, and I think that's a great word, assume it was a murder-suicide and leave it at that unless they know something and must keep it under wraps because of the bizarre nature of the death and the murder situation.
The whole body double thing. One of the theories, one of the early theories that I heard is that these were not their three bodies. The first press release that shows that the bodies were positively identified happens on January 21st, 2015. These bodies The actual autopsies are done on January 18th. David is being accused of this crime on January 18th. They have not even positively identified the bodies yet, and they're already accusing David of this crime. It's ridiculous behavior, disgusting behavior. Things like that frustrate me because, of course, you're going to think that there's something funny going on, that there's something foul going on. And I think this was a big test for all of those people who claim to be truthers, all those people who claim to be a part of, who don't care or who are anti-government or going after the government, corruption, all of this stuff. Where are they? Where are they now? Where did they go? This case was going to hurt a lot of those people. It was not going to help them. And I still do not understand the alternative media and how they responded to this case. That is the gray shame right there of how they responded by not responding. They'll talk about reptilians. They'll talk about shape-shifting. They'll talk about all of these other things. But when we have a clear-cut example that something is wrong here, and it involves a very young child and two young people and a soldier, it is ridiculous. It just really continues to frustrate me, and I'm turning that frustration into something positive. And we're going to find out what really happened here. I can guarantee you. I know that God knows. And if it's his will, if he wants us to know what happened here, it will be done. And nobody is going to stop that. Nobody.
And that's true. And here's another angle. He was in, what did you say, the Army?
Yes. He was in the Army. He served in Iraq. In Afghanistan,
high clearance level, I think. He had
that I'm not sure about. I'm really not sure about that. I've heard different theories on it, but most of those leads have kind of gone dead. Anytime that I'm contacted by a military person or something, not all the time, but a lot of the time, especially ones that kind of knew him or knew of him or served with him, they go cold. They go silent. It's like we're being monitored. We're being watched. It's the watchers. They're not watching for people who are part of any crime here. They're going after the people that are asking questions, and that should be another sign that there's something wrong here.
Well, there's one thing that the watchers don't understand is that they are being monitored by. We'll just say that they are being monitored. And they can't escape either. This is something that's beyond them and beyond us, actually, at this point, until we get something. It's not that they're in control. And I think they know that. I think there would be realization in their hearts that they know this is something beyond them. If it is involving anything that I could surmise could be involved with the Army. Now, he was doing this Revelation, this movie that he was in, and he was in the Army. There are certain sworn affidavits that we go to and sworn testimony. Actually, we swear to uphold top secret things for a certain amount of time, I should say. And the attitude is you don't reveal until you go X number of years out from your service. I was classified top secret, involving weapon systems and development and testing and all kinds of things. And the reality is you don't talk about that at all, or reveal those things that they say do not reveal that surround that. And I kept that agreement. And I had some visits a visit from certain naval investigative services and checking me out, and they're very serious. They can do anything they want with you if they see evidence of total impropriety or anything with government secrets that are revealed and they have evidence that it is true, you're a goner. You're a goner. They'll just make you disappear if they want, or take you to Leavenworth or whatever is in view. The UCMJ gives, you're covered by the UCMJ your whole life once you've been in the military. And if they deem you a big enough threat and you had enough access to, let's just say, limited information that was only need to know for a very select group, and you begin talking about it, they have right to kill you and will do it if they see it necessary. But what I'm seeing here is that he was producing something that was touching in that direction. Now, let me ask a question based on that. His movie was focusing on what areas? Was it a multiple area movie focus where he was covering different areas, or was his focus mainly on a specific area, and what was it about?
The focus seemed to change. So you can watch his 2012 trailer. That's as far as he really got. And in the 2012 trailer, it looks like it is a government takeover. They're knocking down people's doors. They're taking over the whole government. They have a big guillotine, and they're chopping people's heads off with a guy in a freaking Mason robe. It's pretty sick stuff, and that's what turned me off about this back in 2012, because it looked like a satanic sacrifice. It looked like fear porn, and the way that I could not even watch it. Even before I watched it, I had this just overwhelming feeling that this is very dark, this is evil, and to just stay away from it. And here I am for some reason. But I think as the trailer got popular, and as David got more serious about making this into an actual film, which towards the end of his life, they were going to make it into a TV series. But I think it got more spiritual. And I think from everyone that has made comments in public, their public comments, they've stated that David was taking the movie in a different direction than what that 2012 trailer was, which I think is good. So I was wondering, and I'm still not sure, was he taking it in a more spiritual direction? But when we say spiritual, that can mean anything. Was he taking it in a more Christian direction? That's what I'd like to know.
That's a good point. And since he made changes, and that direction was, I think, would have been more light in areas that were not wanted, and then points the finger in a direction of government operatives, possibly under NSA and CIA directives, would have said, we can't let this happen. And since that movie has been canned effectively by his death, that is big motive in my opinion. And maybe they had a good reason to do it. But it comes back to my question, why kill the wife? Why kill the child? This area right there shows a penchant for murder. Somebody who has done this before and is working towards an aim or as a display to others. And I think that fits more of the paradigm, I think, that's in view with David Crowley. This was a message. This was something made to get people's attention. The whole family killed. What was he working on? This. Oops, I'm not working on that. The fact that he was working and changing his movie project and touching on government areas, which involved probably Monterey and Bohemian Grove. I'm sure that became one of the mentioning facts in his movie. Was that not part of it? Did he go that direction?
We don't really know. At least I don't know, because I haven't seen any versions of his script. And I think the most important one would be his final version of his script, or the latest version that he was working on, because he was still working to change whatever the final script was. He was going to turn that into a TV series, so obviously he had to kind of tweak it. But we do know that there was a Bohemian Grove owl statue in his house, and we do know that he had a checklist of different things that he was doing some research on. One included the reptilians, the lizard people, and the queen. Things like that. Like maybe the queen was a lizard or something like that. Stuff like that.
Like David Icke?
Say it again?
Like the Queen of
England? Basically the whole David Icke stuff. Yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
That's a dangerous area to start accusing the Queen of England. That gets into a realm, and that expands it to international. And if you have a derogatory movie that's denigrating the Queen of England, that is definitely not a wise way to go. And there's a lot of people that accuse the Queen of England of certain things, and to me it's hearsay. And I go, well, give me evidence. And to date, I have not seen anything that would implicate the Queen or anybody there. They say they're this, David Icke does. And now he was part of the media before he came into his research. Could he be a plant, a shill? I don't know. A lot of people say he is.
I think he is. Yeah, I think he is.
That's my summation in some regard. But there's a lot of people that reveal a lot of things. And when you talk reptilian, what are you talking about? And shapeshifter, I don't think the Queen is a shapeshifter. I don't believe that. Could she be evil? Well, we're all evil. However, is she actually pursuing a satanic agenda? Now that could come into view where it could get you killed in revelations of that if you had evidence that she was part of ritual or anything that was tied to a satanic bent. And, in England, they had that guy Seville who was a pedophile and was covered and who supplied, quote unquote, children to the royals and to the high up in government and so forth. That was kind of hushed up fairly quick, but it came out and it blew away. And when you're dealing with things of government and involvement, and especially in high government, it is a dangerous area. And you have, even if you have plentiful evidence and you can prove your point, it's best not to talk to a lot of people about it, nor should you broadcast it that you're working on it. And, this is the area which, as I had mentioned to others, when we deal with these things, be careful. Know what you're doing. Know why you're doing it. Because they may come calling on you and say, we're going to kill you now. Have any final words? Well, yeah, I'm doing it for the Father, and my words are not final. They're just for the time being, and after you kill me, there will be some more words I'll have to talk with you later about. That will be the time we'll deal with this for real. And they don't think about that. They think when they kill you that's that. They don't know they have empowered you to the highest, and that at a point they will see you again. Kind of a strange thought, but it is true. And with that, they may see David Crowley again and his wife and child. Wow. And have to face them with the Father. Whoa, wait, what would happen then? Well, people don't think about the consequences in the hereafter with the now, as we're both very aware. And so I conclude that this case is still open, and that maybe the reason it is as it is the Father says, I'm going to adjudicate this one. And woe unto them, because they think they've gotten away with it. No, they haven't. And neither did those who killed Kennedy. They didn't get away with it. That's a fact. But I consider this a murder, but not a murder-suicide, based on the evidence given. Like I said, and which you stated in your position, it is possible that he did do it and that the scene was tampered with. This is a possibility and the reality of a lot of cases. So we do have to leave that door open until we have conclusive proof otherwise. So I don't have any further points that I want to make on that case particularly, but and we're going to proceed on to some other things and see what we can kind of ferret out with that in the future as I look over more things in the Crowley case and then come back with Catherine Michelle. Do you have any final thoughts on that, Greg?
No, I'd say we'll keep talking about it and we'll come back and chat about it next time.
Okay, that sounds good.
Tell a story about a man who was a Mexican. Found out in reality he wasn't even 1%. Thought he was erased by the color of his Latin skin. Now he's just a man, not a product of the government. Your race, a product of the government. They say your face is copied by the government, and everything that you see will be digitized. It's tracked and traced by the eye in the big sky. They spread lies, but they don't know about the people who were planting seeds. Try to tell the truth about the killers of economies. I think about the present when I look at the past. I can't tell you what's in heaven or say where it's at, but I know that 9/11 was an inside job, and I know the day you give up is the day that you lost. Sold your soul to the devil, but it doesn't belong to the evil one who runs the world. Everything comes from the one who made the heaven and dimensions of earth and made the first human beings from his breath in the dirt and all these products of the government to brainwash kids with false hopes and false morals to make them forget about the things that really matter. At the end of the book, you got your silver gold platters, but you're only a crook. You didn't build that, you stole that, then you took credit. It'll be easy to forgive you, but they'll never forget it. So let me tell a story about a man who was a Mexican. He found out in reality he wasn't even 1%. Thought he was a race by the color of his land skin. Now he's just a man, not a product of the government. Your race, a product of the government. They say your face is copied by the government, and everything that you see will be digitized. It's tracked and traced by the eye in the big sky. I'm not sorry about my past, cause it made me who I am. I'm sorry about the pain you had to go through as a kid. All this wishing on a star never got me into Mars. Relying on a dream only gave me fantasies. There's no easy road ahead. Every mountain that you climb is a battle to be won, but it's all a part of life. Every day I go to battle in the spiritual war. They call me sheep, they call me cattle, but I gotta ignore them. They can't defeat us, so they're making us defeat ourselves. They said survival of the fittest, it's survival of wealth. They want materialistic problems, it takes center stage, and everyone who don't agree is just a rat in a cage. But I was born a human being, and that's how I will leave, put on this earth for a reason, and it's not to deceive. And all these government lies, they disguise all the treason. They always get caught, cause nobody believes them. Let me tell a story about a man who was a Mexican. Found out in reality he wasn't even 1%. Thought he was a race by the color of his land skin. Now he's just a man, not a product of the government. Your race, a product of the government. They say your face is copied by the government, and everything that you see will be digitized. It's tracked and traced by the eye on the left sky. So long ago, still yesterday. Woke up, I was thinking about the price we paid. Got our fake freedom like a sacrifice. Don't talk about the government, cause that ain't nice. People getting tortured still. Found another war on Capitol Hill. Raised the debt, created Osama. Killed another patsy, gave us Obama. Where do we go from here? Turning off the news, there's feels like I've been waiting so long. Every time that I fall, every time that I won't be unbreakable. Every time my goal slips out my hand, pick it back up and fall again. Add a scar on tainted skin, another day that I don't win. Starting over from the bottom, truth is lost, but someone's got them locked inside a box of lies. Box of Prado for the eyes, box of candy for the weak, and a suitcase for the more deceived. Let me tell a story about a man who was a Mexican. He found out in reality he wasn't even 1%. Thought he was a race by the color of his land skin. Now he's just a man, not a product of the government. Your race, a product of the government. They say your face is copied by the government, and everything that you see will be digitized. It's tracked and traced by the eye in the big sky.
Detective Gummer ever speak to Kamel's father? And Sidra stated that all communication with Detective Gummer went through her. In his police report dated January 22nd, 2015, Detective Gummer said that Sidra asked that he only contact her and not the father. Quote, she stated her father is under a lot of stress due to what is going on with her mother, and she felt that it best that she be the go-between between us and her father. Okay, so here we have Sidra saying all communication went through her. And then we have Detective Gummer saying Sidra asked that all communication go through her, not directly to the father. And when I asked Detective Gummer in my 21 questions, did he ever speak with Mr. Alam? He said no. It was a two-letter answer. No, it was clear. It was very clear. However, days later, Detective Gummer then tells Dan Hennon that he spoke with Mr. Alam on several occasions. Several occasions. So at this point, I'm being told that Detective Gummer never spoke with Mr. Alam. Dan Hennon is being told that Detective Gummer did speak with Mr. Alam several times. The police report doesn't mention Detective Gummer ever speaking with Mr. Alam. It only mentions that Sidra was to be the go-between between police and the Alam family. So I then reached out to Detective Gummer to find out what was the problem here. Was there something that got lost in translation maybe? Was my question not clear? Did he not understand it? But the more that I reread the question, it was hard for me to understand how somebody could misunderstand it. A mistake could have been made, and a mistake probably was made, is what it looks like. Here's where it gets a little interesting. So I was asking Detective Gummer a follow-up question, pretty much, just saying, hey, why did you tell me something different than what you told Dan Hennon? And he says, my apologies. I answered the question incorrectly. I have spoken with Kamel's father on several occasions. So I then asked him why he answered the question incorrectly. And he just responded, a mistake on my part, not trying to hide anything, which is good. That's a good answer. Because a mistake was made. Another mistake. How many mistakes can we pile on top of other ones that were made in this case? And life is just a learning process. We all mess up. So this isn't a hit piece to show all the mistakes that Detective Gummer did. This is just to point out some of the reasons why this case should be reopened, re-examined, because there are still many questions. There are still a lot of things that don't make sense, a lot of stories that don't add up, a lot of people with differing stories, and we're just trying to figure out what is the actual truth here. When you have so many people giving you a different story, it's hard to figure out what the actual truth is, and when everybody thinks that their truth is truth. So as far as this case goes, I don't know what the truth is because everybody has a different story. That's been one of the biggest problems here.
Come on, baby, dry your eyes, wipe your tears away. Never like to see you cry. Won't you please forgive me? I wouldn't ever try to hurt you. I just needed someone to hold me, to fill the void while you were gone, to fill this space of emptiness. I'm only human, of flesh and blood I'm made. So many nights I longed to hold you. So many times I looked and saw your face. Nothing could change the way I feel. No one else could ever take your place. I'm only human, the flesh and blood have made. Human, born to make mistakes. I'm only human, the flesh and blood have made. Human, born to make mistakes. Yeah.
Police say there are photos of the bullet hole in the living room on January 17th. Even though 1 month later they had to come back on February 18th of 2015 to find the bullet hole and to find the actual bullet, for whatever reason, there were photos taken of this bullet hole on January 17th, 2015, and they still missed it. Even by their own photos that the police took, they still could not find this bullet. They still could not find this bullet hole. Okay, well, police moved things around in the living room, yet they did not look up to see a bullet hole above their heads. Whew. I mean, that calls into question just about everything else that they did in this case, right? That should at least make us want to get a second look, a third look. That should raise some eyebrows in the Apple Valley Police Department and possibly in the Dakota County Sheriff's Department as well. Now, police were in the house 3 times within 34 days: January 17th, January 19th, and February 18th of 2015. Detective Gummert doesn't know the exact date of when he saw the bullet hole in the living room. I think it would be nice to get the actual photos of the bullet hole on January 17th. And the next information disclosure request that we put in will ask for those photos. We will also ask for photos of the murder weapon where it was found. We would at the very least, we would like to have a photo of the murder weapon itself, which we don't have right now. The only images out there of the murder weapon on a table, not where it was found, but on a table, was given to Tom Lydon of Fox News 9. And so it's public, it's out there, not the best quality, but the photo's there. So police spell Chris Klein's last name differently in 2 different police reports: Klein, Klien, both by Detective Brian Bone. Detective Knight spells it Cline. So just more mistakes, more little things that happen. Police are human, born to make mistakes. We all are. It happens. There was also the question of, did David swear at Kamel's father? Now, here we have a few differing accounts here, where first we have Sidra told Detective Gummert, and this is a quotation from Detective Gummert's police report: David called her father and in the conversation was swearing at him and advised that they were no longer allowed to contact the family and that they were to leave the family alone. Sidra stated that she called David and attempted to discuss what was going on up in Minnesota, and David advised her not to contact the family moving forward. Sidra stated she attempted to contact Kamel several times after her conversation with David, but Kamel would not return her texts or calls, page 41. Now, in August of 2015, Dan Hinnon spoke with the father, Anjem Alam, and Mr. Alam told Dan that he didn't remember David ever yelling at him or swearing at him. And Dan Hinnon has been very public about that conversation. We do have the pact theory. There was a question early on: was there a pact between David and Kamel to end their lives and take their daughter with them? And Sean Wright told me that there was a pact between the couple. At the same time, or around that same time, back in early 2015, Mason Hendricks on Facebook wrote that it was a joint decision between David and Kamel to end their lives and take their daughter with them. That's what he's basically saying, not the exact quote. We have the exact quote. But when I spoke with Hendricks later on, probably about a year later, he basically said that he does not believe that there was a pact. So there could be a lot of people who believed one thing when the case first happened, when the case was first opened, when the investigation was still ongoing, and then later on realized that, okay, maybe what I thought was true wasn't true. And that's kind of what I'm hoping will come from this too, is that a lot of people who were so adamant, who just thought that David Crowley was guilty, that I would just like for some of them to reconsider the possibility that maybe he's not. Or maybe what the police told us isn't exactly true. And I think a lot of people can agree that what the police told us, there's a lot to be questioned. There's a lot of holes that are missing, a lot of holes that weren't found, one in particular until 1 month later. But we know that on January 17th, police looked down into the basement, followed a bullet hole that was in the living room floor that led into the basement, that was lodged into one of the basement walls. So we know they looked down. And if their theory is true that there were photos taken on January 17th of the living room ceiling, then we know that they looked up. The only question is, why didn't they see the bullet hole in the living room? And I asked Mason Hendricks this, and he also wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, and said that because there was a Christmas tree there, that it blocked the view of where the bullet hole was. And he's not saying that that's exactly what happened, but that's his that was his view on it, was why they missed the hole, because that was a big question. How do you miss a hole? He even asked that. How do you miss a hole? But so at first I was like, okay, that makes sense, I guess. But when they move the Christmas tree, and you can tell the Christmas tree has been moved, at that point they should have seen the hole in the ceiling. So not nitpicking. I mean, this is a big deal. This isn't just like they just missed one little hole and it had nothing to do with the case. This is the hole that led to the actual bullet that they say David killed himself with. So they didn't have that for 1 month, but they were already working with the theory that David Crowley was guilty, and they were going about to prove that theory. They spent a whole year trying to prove that theory. And I don't know about you, but to me, it has never been proven. And Detective Gummert is right when he says that a lot of people will never believe their theory. And why should we believe their theory? How could we believe their theory based on the evidence that they've given us? And then at the same time are saying that we believe, oh, the government killed him. I've never mentioned a government conspiracy as what happened with David. I never said that David was killed by the government, or the government had anything to do with killing David Crowley. But at the same time, they make it really hard to discount that possibility. Now, one of the reasons why Mason Hendricks believed that the pact theory was true had to do with some of the comments that were made by some of the family members. Some of the family members had actually brought this theory forth. And maybe that was just so that they didn't have to deal with the fact that it was possible that David Crowley was guilty. Mistakes are all over the place. I've only documented a few of them here. I do wonder, for those of you who believe that David Crowley is guilty, why do you believe it? So this song, I really like this one. And Bakthot came in to the studio, laid down his, not only his vocal, his verse to it, but he also laid down most of the music that you're hearing is from him, is by him and by Justin. So that was really cool. I really like this little extra part here. So the song should be about falling in love, and I am having a little difficulty with it just because it has to be right, it has to be perfect, and it's just not there yet. It's just not what it needs to be. So we're gonna keep going until we get there, and we will get there. It always happens. Some songs take longer than others. Some songs are just like, boom, okay, that's great. But lately, that's been happening to me a lot, where it's like, all right, I end up spending a lot of time on these songs, and that's good because that's what I want. You know, it has to be perfect. There can't be any doubt in it. And hey, once it's ready, it's ready. So happy with that. We're gonna take a little side trip here through traffic. All right, so trying to drive and trying to do all this. Really excited to be back though. Really excited to be back in the studio. It's been way too long. So we'll be working on song number 6 today, and I gotta say it is one of my favorites here. So really excited to see how this one comes out. Where we begin and where it ends. It's very interesting to see. Very interesting to note. So, go through here, do a little practice. Try to loosen up those vocal cords since we didn't do it earlier. Gotta do it sometime, right? Let's roll. Found a fork in the road, crossed the bridge of unknown, climbed the mountain of snow to reach the valley of gold, waiting for a new day to come and take you away. Just a couple of stars away from Venus and Mars. Love to dance in the rain, try to sing through the pain. Always left in the dark to feel the hole in your heart. She was deceiving whatever you were seeing for you to believe that this was love when it wasn't much. You found a lover who found another who made a friend, and it happened again. She wants another to be her lover, and you ain't him. You don't know where it is. Dropping love on the door, travel south to go north. Now you're lost in the road. Try to hide the confusion. You just know you won't be ignored, but you're losing movement, and it looks like she's bored. So she wanders and she ponders, going under all the covers of more lovers. If you smother her to the arms of another, she'll be leaving, looking for. Oh, the police did a thorough investigation. Okay, well, how? Explain it. How did they do a thorough investigation? I'll explain to you how they didn't. They say there's freedom loving, this and that, and all this garbage. I'm not buying it. You can believe whatever you want. Um, I'm also not buying when they say that the police did a very thorough investigation when the police walked into the house, saw three dead bodies in the living room, and could not look up in the living room and see a bullet hole leading to the attic right above the living room. And this bullet hole would lead to the bullet that they will allege 1 month later, they will allege that this bullet found is the one that David used to shoot himself in the head. Why didn't they check the attic on the first day? Is that a thorough investigation? Wouldn't a thorough investigation include looking up to see if there were any bullet holes? If there's a Christmas tree there, how about we move the Christmas tree? Oh, yes, they did move the Christmas tree. Not only did they move the Christmas tree, they moved the murder weapon. The hands missing, okay? Most of the skulls missing. I mean, who walks into a house and just says, "Oh yeah, David did this"? Well, his skull's missing. We're not sure which direction he shot himself because we didn't bother to look up. Oh, real thorough, very thorough. Okay, the newspaper where there was one found in the trash and one found outside, and the newspaper boy stated that he delivered the paper on one day. His mom said another day. The actual newspaper said, the papers probably didn't come out until this other day. It's just, come on, it's not a thorough investigation. Not talking to all of the family members, you call that a thorough investigation? Um, I mean, multiple reports of, well, the father didn't speak with the lead detective. Oh, no, the father did, depending on who you ask. There's nothing thorough going on here, okay? So we can just get rid of the whole thorough thing now. And yes, we only know a fraction of it, but even the fraction that we know is bad enough. Even that shows this investigation was not thorough. We were told there are no other police reports. We have them all. That's what we were told. So if we have them all, it does raise a lot of questions about this thorough investigation theory. How thorough was it? I mean, 94 pages, and what does it really tell you? Do you really think anybody reading those 94 pages is going to go, oh, okay, yeah, now it makes sense. Now I understand the evidence, why the Gray State team and why the police think that David Crowley is guilty.
if these 94 pages and these 464 photos are what are supposed to convince us that David Crowley is guilty, then the police have done a terrible job, And that's now it's on us. Now it's on the people. It's on the public to ask for more. And we're going to, and let's see what we actually get.
Several of the group have filed Freedom of Information requests to see the photos and have been hit with, I think, the couple people that have filed that got the same 464 photos. None show the weapon or the gun. Now, your question to Officer Gummert is, was there additional photos that were not released? And he wrote back with his answer that the number of photos unreleased were in the hundreds. So the pictures of the weapon and the position of the bodies and the pictures of the gruesome bodies were not sent, which is fine. It sounds like the family didn't want those, and maybe they, that would make sense. But a picture of a weapon, the picture of the bullet holes in the wall where David shot at the dog, the other pictures throughout the house that were not shown. Why were there hundreds of photos withheld? Other than sensitivity issues, or if they were gruesome, do you know why there would be hundreds of photos not released, Greg?
They must be really gruesome. That's the only thing I can think of. So knowing that there was a dog that could have screwed up this whole crime scene, you still, within hours of walking into this house, you still say that you think that David Crowley's guilty. I would really like to know how many cops really walked in that house and knew that day that David Crowley was guilty, or how many might have thought that, well, maybe not. But let's see where the facts take us. So
I agree. I think that anyone stepping into that crime scene, whether they were a seasoned veteran law enforcement or an everyday Joe, would take a look at what happened and safely assume that, it looks like the husband went nuts, killed the two people and himself. I think anyone can stand to reason that was plausible, that he did this. But to come out and say that he did it and say we've basically solved it in 48 hours, I think that's what drives the folks like you and I crazy, because you don't know that. You can say that there's a suspicious deaths in the area. 3 people are dead. We're assuming it's a murder-suicide. We're investigating it as a murder-suicide. But the Apple Valley Police came out and said that there is no alarm there's no alarm for the public safety. This crime is solved, and he did it. And that's where I think that the fine line where you and I come in to say, you can't say that. You can assume, and you're going to go under that assumption as a working theory. But you can't come out and say that it is, and then say, well, we didn't know for sure until it was confirmed to us 7 months later when the BCA finished their conclusion. So then your first 7 months really was a hypothesis, is what we would have been more comfortable if Officer Gummert would have said for 7 months, that was our working hypothesis. And then the BCA concluded their investigation. And by that information, then we concluded that David did this. Still is a hypothesis. But by saying it 48 hours, it really raised suspicions that was something was up, because there's no way you could tell, because nothing made sense from the get-go in this case.
no, and that never changed. When did that ever change? They never had a suicide note. They never had any real proof that David was the person who killed his wife and his daughter and himself. So what did they have 7 months later that they didn't have on those first couple days? And it's just like, I don't see anything. I don't see any evidence, and
Yeah.
I'm just baffled by it. I'm really baffled by it.
Correct. We've seen nothing that's been sent to us as just citizen investigators. Nothing that shows that. I haven't seen any evidence at all that David did this. Now, I'm not assuming what happened or what didn't happen, but the point of the fact of the matter is there's been no evidence to prove that he did it. Now, we know that's a reasonable hypothesis, and that law enforcement did make that hypothesis and were using that as their working theory, which is fine to say, I think. But whatever came back from the BCA to Apple Valley Police Department to say that he did it, what is that? That's the question. What made it a slam dunk at that point? We haven't seen it. Apple Valley Police, when they did their final conclusion of the case closing, did not come out and say it's reasons X, Y, and Z that we just found out last week, and now it's the case closed. They just said that everything's done and it's all wrapped up in a nice little bow. So the question that we have is not as what I would call conspiracy theorists. We're not out here questioning what we're questioning what happened because we haven't been given any information as to what did happen.
Right, and I really didn't like some of the things that Gummert said in those 21 questions. And one of the biggest things that really, it just always gets under my skin. I try not to let anything get under my skin, but this one always does. Whenever they say, that because we're questioning it, that we think that our government killed David Crowley and his family. Okay, people can think that and we can theorize that, but I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, that's any less possible than David Crowley killing himself, but I'm also not going to say that I think right now that the government killed him. But I don't believe that David Crowley killed his wife and killed his daughter and then himself. That doesn't mean that it's not true, and I'm still open to the possibility that is what really happened here. It is highly possible, sure. But it's also highly possible that that's not what happened here. And so it's just like, okay, let's look at where this case has really taken us. And for me, it's just come back full circle. We're right back to day one. What new information after 1 year, what do we really have?
All right, welcome, Ross. It's Greg and I. There's three of us here so far. We're doing a public broadcast here, going over the latest in the case. And one of the questions we had, Ross, was I don't know if you heard this or not with the 21 answers from Officer Gummert, is that he did say in his final paragraph, he wrapped up by saying, I know people aren't going to like this, but David Crowley and his family were not killed by the government or agents of the government. Now, why would he say that? I've never said that. Greg's never said that.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's the government or not, that doesn't really make a difference for what we're trying to find out, which is, whether or not David Crowley was, committed a suicide or was murdered,
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And Greg, you said it best too. The question here that we're posing with our group is, was there foul play involved, yes or no? Now, yeah, that could fall under the umbrella of a government conspiracy, black ops, a wet work team. It could have been friends, neighbors. It could have been co-workers from the Gray State Project. That includes a whole realm of things if there's foul play involved. And everything here leads us to foul play. The only evidence that I've seen leads to foul play. I don't know what type of foul play, but we haven't seen any evidence yet that David Crowley did this. Is the part that's can't seem to get through. So people understand that. I think they think that we're conspiracy theorists thinking that the government did this hit. Now, which it might be certainly true as well, but I've never laid down that line, and neither has Greg, to say that we followed that suit. Some people certainly do believe that.
Yeah, and I think with good reason, but I think nonetheless, I don't know if the government really needs to put in the work to get that done, and either way, I think they would have benefited from it. You know what I mean? They didn't have to do it themselves to benefit from the outcome.
Yeah.
Is the way I see it.
Greg, the other question that came up that I found very interesting is question number 15. Was the Department of Homeland Security or the FBI involved? And if so, why or to what capacity? And Officer Gummert wrote back and says, no, they were not contacted and they were not involved, which is fine. I believe that he's true and accurate in saying that they weren't involved. The question is, Mason Hendricks told you in confidence that that's the reason this is taking so long is that DHS and FBI have got to sign off on this from the Apple Valley Police in order for them to go for this case to be closed. Why on earth would he say something like that? That's nothing that could have been just taken out of context. I don't want to say it's an outright lie, but
No, right,
there's no
because
truth to that whatsoever. So
well,
someone,
that also, well, that could have been what he was told too. So maybe he was told, and maybe that wasn't true. I don't know. Maybe he was not telling me what the actual truth was too. But he's not the only one who has mentioned DHS and the FBI. Sean Wright also mentioned them too. And so, but here you have the lead detective saying no, they were not involved at all. Now, I think the question is well, if they were involved, would they have to tell us, or would they not? Now, just because Gummert doesn't say that they're involved, maybe it goes higher. Maybe he doesn't know. He's not in contact with everybody who is involved in this case, which seems to be the captain and the chief. So maybe they had some type of contact with DHS or FBI, but basically all that we know now is that Detective Gummert says that they were not involved in this investigation. I think that's a big statement.
What about them doing their own independent investigations, completely independent of Apple Valley Police? Then would they even know about it going on if they just show up and do their own research and they don't even tell them? You know what I mean?
True.
Which I don't think they would admit their involvement either way. Anybody,
Yeah.
you know, from a higher level.
and Gummert said too, he basically said that they were not contacted and they were not involved.
True.
Could have qualified that by saying, to my knowledge, they were not. Ross, you had a good point that if they were and he wasn't aware of that, he wouldn't be necessarily lying about it either. Maybe they were.
Right, exactly.
But the fact
He just
that
wouldn't know, like Greg said.
now Mason specifically said that was the reason the whole thing was held up. So if he's not lying, which I'm not saying that he is, he told you what he was told. The question was, or the question is, I think to this day is, if someone told him that's the thing holding it up, who told him then? Where does stuff like this get introduced? If it's fact, when does it starting to get fizzled out? And if it's not fact, who introduces these types of concepts as rumors? And that's more my beef, not to point out who's lying, but how does this stuff come in? This is clear misinformation and disinformation if it's not in fact true. It's got to originate somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
If I could turn the page in time, then I'd rearrange just a day or two. Tell me lies, but I couldn't find a way. So I'll settle for one day to believe in you. Tell me lies. Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies. Tell me lies, tell me lies. Oh no, no, you can't disguise. You can't disguise. Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies. Tell me lies, tell me lies. Oh no, no, you can't disguise.
What was the question answer on number 16? That was of the 21 questions.
Number 16.
Yeah, number 16.
Did you ever speak? Okay, so did he ever speak with the father? And the answer is no. So Gummert never spoke with the father, but he spoke a lot with Sidra, with the other daughter. And to me, that really was kind of strange. I did not understand that. I didn't understand why either of them wasn't talking to the other person. And as far as we know, the father was never talking to any cops, right?
Well,
From Apple Valley.
here's what I've got that I haven't shared with you two yet, but just today, in talking with Officer Gummert today live, face to face,
Yeah.
he said these words: "Our correspondence from the department and the Alam family was mainly spent with phone calls to Anjum Alam, the father. He says,
Interesting.
all my conversations were with Mr. Alam. All the conversations that we dealt with back and forth were on the phone with Mr. Alam.
Wait, what? Well, hold on then. That doesn't make sense then, because the police reports also say something different. And now you're saying, okay, that's, I don't,
So,
I
once
don't
again,
understand.
I want to clarify that we're not pointing fingers at people or subjects lying, but Sidra went on the record by saying that she herself was the main communication liaison with the Apple Valley Police Department with all communication. It was done through her and her only because her father was too busy and spending time with the ill mother, Nyla Alam. The police report said that most of the information going forward on the Alam family would be handled through Sidra. The 21 questions responded directly from Officer James Gummert said he never once spoke on the phone to Mr. Alam at all. He said, I never spoke with him.
Yeah,
Now,
that's all I asked him. I asked him, did he ever speak with him? And he just said no.
So I never spoke with him. So we know it wasn't in person because Anjum Alam was never here. The only way to communicate with him, and he said it was on the phone. We're not talking emails back and forth, texting, instant messaging, phone calls. He said my time spent with Mr. Alam, with the Alam family, was all through Anjum Alam via the phone.
Interesting.
So now, once again, my question would be,
Right.
who filled out those 21 question answers? It doesn't appear to be Mr. Gummert.
Well, it better be. It better be him. Who else could it be?
Well, I'll leave that up because I don't. I'll leave that up to you two. I don't understand how a simple question that easy, which took 5 weeks to answer. Did you speak to Mr. Alam? The answer was no. And today he looked me right in the eye and said, I spoke to them all the time. He was our leading point person for that.
That doesn't make sense to me then. I don't understand
That's
that.
baffling.
So I will move on to another topic, but that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with for those out there. This is the kind of information that gets you to start questioning things and these are not hard questions. These are very simple, straightforward questions that people cannot answer.
Right.
We're getting side stories. Nothing makes sense.
So he either lied to me or he lied to you. He lied to one of us, is what it sounds like.
No, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that, but I can't think of any other alternate answer.
That's what it sounds like. But like you said before, unless there was multiple people putting in multiple answers. So if someone else filled out the questions all together and they didn't even talk to each other, you know what I mean?
Well,
Yeah.
I agree with that, but I also agree with that before these answers went back to you, Greg, I'm sure they got their I's dotted and T's crossed by someone. Yeah, he's not answering them our questions. In fact, the department isn't either, which is fair. They've basically gone on record to say we're no longer discussing the case. The case is closed.
But he discussed it with you.
Well, I went
today.
I got a phone call on Friday from Steph at the Apple Valley Police Department saying that my Freedom of Information request has come in and it's ready to be picked up. It's on a CD. And so I went over there today during the noon lunch hour and walked in to pick up the CD and talked to the gal down at the front desk, Bev. Gave me the CD and gave me the information and said one of the officers wants to speak with you. So I said, okay, that sounds good. She brought down Officer Jim Gummert, and he came down and we chatted for about 15-20 minutes. And I know they didn't want to speak about it. They don't want to talk about it. But she must have had a note or something on the Freedom of Information request that once I come to pick up that information to give him a call, because she called him right away, and he came down once they knew I was there. So we had a friendly friendly, respectful chat, I should say. But I brought up a couple things that didn't make sense, and he brought up some things that didn't make sense, and went back and forth, and we agreed to disagree on some things, and took it as that. But those are the two things that I found very interesting, because I said, and he was aware of your questions, Greg, because he says, I know I responded back to a gentleman named Greg, and I said, well, one of the answers was that no, you never did speak with Mr. Alam.
Right.
And he goes, no, I spoke with him all the time.
Well, then something does
That's
not
what I'm
make
telling
sense.
And when I got home,
Something does.
I looked at this 21 questions again, and it's clear as day. There's no way to misinterpret the question.
No.
There's no way to answer it wrong. There's no way to
Right.
think of something else. And so I don't know. And I also asked about the bodies, the bones. I said, I've had dogs as pets. I've had 2 daughters I've got, and at the time they were 5 years old. I'm trying to think of, would the bone structure at that age in a dog, a mid-sized dog like that, would they eat human bones? Would they even be able to get through it? The arm bone consists of the humerus, the radius, and the ulna. Even if it's a 5-year-old child, those are pretty strong bones for a dog to break through, chew up, do whatever. And he basically said that there was no body parts anywhere in the house. They were missing. The dog hadn't eaten in 3 weeks and probably just ate them. Well, I could see the dog eating the flesh and maybe the small bones and the flesh, the ligaments, the muscles, but these are the upper arm, the humerus, is a pretty strong bone for a 5-year-old girl, even, who's tiny and petite. That a 40-pound beagle mix, or whatever it was, devoured and swallowed and digested these bones.
Yeah.
And he didn't have an answer for that. He didn't want to get into that because he's not a veterinarian, of course. But I said it's questions like that really, they're just basic questions. How does that seem plausible? And he says, well, they weren't found anywhere. Well, so I guess they ate them. Well, you need to take a step back and realize what it is you're saying, because
Right.
like the water bowls in the house. How did the dog survive without water for 3 weeks? His answer was, see the answer to number 2, that the dogs ravaged the bodies to eat that. Well, that answers the question with what did the dog eat? A dog needs water to survive, not food, water. So if there's 3 toilets in the house, one lid is shut, and the other one there's crap stuffed in there, a dirty diaper or some clothing or whatever it was, the dog only had 1 toilet bowl as an option. So just because the dog was thirsty, that doesn't answer the question how it survived for 3 weeks if all it had to feed on was food, tangible meat. That a dog needs water. So things don't really add up. Now, whether a dog can eat a bone or not, I doubt it, but let's get into the skull. Let's get into a jawbone of a 29-year-old man. David Crowley's jawbone, are you saying that the dog ate the skull, the jawbone, the teeth, everything?
A full skull.
A full skull is missing. Comel's full skull is missing. 2 hands, an arm, and 2 skull. Adult. That by the time your adult skull gets to be 28, 29 years old, that's pretty solid bone there. That's not a soft child's type of bone structure there. That's a solid adult bone that I don't know how the dog would eat a skull.
Right.
Around the nose and the eye socket, it's very dense bone, but basically they're saying once again that it wasn't found throughout the house, so I guess the dog ate it. And what we're asking is not to solve what happened, but the question is to think deeper as far as it doesn't make sense on the surface. Where did this stuff go? Mason Hendricks said that the bones were all over the house. Body parts were everywhere. Well, dog feces were everywhere, perhaps. That's not the same as saying that there are bones scattered around the house. So there's just too many unanswered questions. And I like the fact that Officer Gummert responded to the 21 and he answered the 21. But in closing, I mean, it's more questions than there is answers. So I'm going to go through, I think, later on this week and put together another kind of a summary of what it was with talking with Officer Gummert and some of the information I got back from the Freedom of Information request. I'll put that together in a future show here this week.
Really, we're talking about people who keep telling us that they know the truth. They have the truth. They've seen the evidence. They've seen everything. We haven't seen anything. And from what Gummert is basically saying, you've seen our whole case. If you've seen those 94 pages, and if you've seen the 464 photos, what I gather from what Detective Gummert is saying is that you have seen their entire case. So based on that, are you satisfied? Is anybody out there really satisfied with just that? And no, I mean, who could be? I really don't get it. Even people who, you know, would think that David Crowley is guilty, they might go, oh, well, no, because there's also there's A, B, C, D that isn't in those 94 pages or isn't a part of those 464 photos. So nobody should be thinking that these 94 pages and the 464 photos prove that David Crowley is guilty, because they don't. That's just my
She's assuming that based on some of my comments and my alleged accusations about her, that's why she assumed that the conversation was not going to happen.
I just met you, and this is crazy. But here's my number, so call me maybe. It's hard to look right at your baby, but here's my number, so call me maybe. Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy. But here's my number, so call me maybe.
I don't believe that anything that I said on Facebook would indicate that I no longer wanted to speak with Judy Prochnow. I mean, in the second sentence, she apologizes for accusing me of not sending it, realizing that yes, I did send it. I mean, there's really no reason for me to fake send it or to, you know. But then again, there's no reason for anyone to accuse me of not sending out this message, or even to accuse me of not wanting to have this conversation that we had been working out and planning for probably a month or so, maybe. She says, I had not heard back from you, unless that too is in the spam file, and your comments and accusations about me led me to believe you were no longer interested. So here's what she says. It is because of those comments and your remarks about Dan Crowley and friends that makes me feel your claim to be a Christian has no foundation. I could care less what you feel. Care less what you think, if I'm a Christian or what anybody thinks. You know, it's all about my actions. Those actions, that's how people will know if I'm a Christian or if I'm not. And you know, sometimes maybe people think that I'm not, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. What matters to me is what Jesus Christ thinks. That's it. So, and he's the only one who really knows. And that's why I never claim to know who is a Christian and who is not, because I don't believe anybody knows. No human knows. But Jesus Christ knows. The Father knows. The Son knows. The Holy Ghost knows. They know. That's all that needs to know. You can call yourself a Christian. It doesn't mean anything. It's by your actions. So, hey, if people think that my actions show that I'm not a Christian, well, why not? Why not listen to them? Maybe they have a valid point. You know, maybe they have some reason why, some reason that makes me not a Christian in their eyes. But see, my Christianity doesn't revolve around their eyes, doesn't revolve around them. And it is a serious accusation to say that to somebody who does believe in Jesus Christ and who does take it very seriously. It's a serious accusation to say your Christianity has no foundation. Now, why would you even say that to a person? First of all, how can you back it up? Where's the evidence? And is it based on scripture? I mean, and for her, yes, it is based because she gives us one scripture here. God has directed you to not bear false witness against your neighbor. Okay, I mean, it's just like, yeah, don't bear false witness. Tell the truth. Sounds simple to me. She's telling me I can't sit behind a camera nodding my head every time Dan Hannon says something slanderous about someone involved in this tragic situation. I'm tired of you saying all this stuff, accusing Dan Hannon of all these things. You're accusing Dan Hannon of accusing other people of all of these different things. And Dan Hannon's mind is not made up about what really happened here. He's open to various theories, and he's even said that he's open to the possibility that David Crowley is guilty too. So, I mean, for someone to say that we are not even going down that road, no, we've gone down that. We started at that road. That's where we started. Look at where we're at now. Are we still open to it? Of course. Absolutely. Should be open at this point. I think we should be open to a lot of different possibilities. We should be open to maybe what we told was not true, and we should be open to the fact that maybe he's not guilty. And I'm not bearing false witness against my neighbor. I'm trying to have a real conversation with my neighbor and discuss this and figure out what is really going on here. I mean, that should be the whole point. The point shouldn't just be, well, this is what they said. The police said this. All right, so that's it. It's done. Okay, come on. Are we serious here? I mean, a lot of the stuff she brings up, I would find slanderous. I would believe that she's slandering Dan Hannon, first of all, and she's slandering me too. If she really believes some of these accusations that she's saying against me and Dan Hannon, she's accusing us of a lot of things, and a lot of things that are just like, come on, are you serious? This is bizarre behavior. The "your day will come" comment was not a threat. It was a warning. Well, a warning is a threat. So, I mean, now it's a threat and it's a warning, So, hey, keep on talking, please. Okay, so here's the funny part right here. And yes, this is funny because of how ridiculous this sounds. And finding the truth, Greg, is considering all sides of the story. Why aren't you considering the side of the story that maybe David Crowley is not guilty? Consider that. Consider that. Have an open mind. None of you on this page accepted the murder-suicide. Okay, again, another lie. Another out-and-out lie. So she's lying there when she says that from the moment all of you heard about this death, you jumped to the conclusion that it had to be murder. She's lying there. And in order for you to maintain the conclusion, you disregard any point anyone who disagrees with you attempts to make. Another lie. Now, she says, I was lying when I said that I saw what David had handwritten about his wife and child, and since then I have seen much more. But if I were to say on your pages, I would be called a liar or worse and discredited. Well, you just called yourself a liar. You just prove that you lied about it. So you lied about a statement that you previously made. Um, I think it's good that you accept that responsibility and admit that you did lie about it. That's good.
You took your time with the call. I took no time with the fall. You gave me nothing at all, but still you're in my way.
There are still many questions, many answers that we are seeking. And with your help, and as long as you don't give up, I'm sure we will find out what the truth is. What really happened to Philip Marshall? Did he really kill his two children, kill the family dog, and then kill himself, as the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office has told us? That is the main question. And what do they base their findings on? How much evidence do they have? Where is their proof? Show me the proof. Well, there isn't any. Little to no proof, little to no evidence. And the fact that the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office came to this conclusion so quickly should make everybody think twice. Is this just another day in paradise, or is there more to it? We're going to be talking about that right now. Going to be reading a couple quotes from a chapter of my next book, False Flag, Philip Marshall. This is something Philip Marshall has said. The official version about some ghost, Osama bin Laden, in some cave on the other side of the world, defeating our entire military establishment on U.S. soil is absolutely preposterous. The true reason the attack was successful is because of an inside military stand down and a coordinated training operation that prepared the hijackers to fly heavy commercial airliners. We have dozens of FBI documents to prove that this flight training was conducted in California, Florida, and Arizona in the 18 months leading up to the attack of 9/11. That's from Philip Marshall himself. Philip Marshall understood that 9/11 was a false flag event. He wrote two nonfiction books about 9/11 and the lies surrounding it. But he also wrote a fictional book titled Lakefront Airport. According to his Facebook page, False Flag 9/11, in Lakefront Airport, quote, Marshall writes a contemporary historical fiction based on actual events, including his early flying experience at Lakefront Airport, his relationship with the CIA, Barry Seal, Pablo Escobar, and the notorious Medellin cocaine cartel. End quote. In his early life, Marshall was a contract pilot at Lakefront Airport in New Orleans, Louisiana. He was raised in New Orleans, the same city where on March 1st, 1967, District Attorney Jim Garrison arrested Clay Shaw for conspiring to kill John F. Kennedy. As a pilot, Marshall was involved in many government operations. Then one day he decided to kill his two children, his dog, and then himself without a motive and without a suicide note. Someone within the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office concludes that the deaths of Philip, Alex, and Michaela Marshall are the result of a double murder suicide, immediately ruling out the possibility of a triple murder. The authorities' conclusion is reached within hours of finding the bodies in Murphy's, California. In the words of Han Solo, I've got a bad feeling about this. Another independent researcher looking into the false flag of 911 is dead. I got a chance to visit the small town where this alleged double murder suicide happened 1 week after the incident occurred. After visiting twice, it's clear to me that many in the small town of Murphys have their doubts about Philip Marshall killing his two teenage children, his dog, and then himself. Murphys is a small town full of local business owners, retired military personnel, wine connoisseurs, bikers, and of course, Freemasons and members of the Order of the Eastern Star. Surely in a small town like this, news travels fast. I knocked on the front door of the Masonic Hall, hoping to get a comment about the tragedy. I guess no one was home. There were three cars parked in the parking lot, though. Some type of church or temple was attached to the two-floor building where weekly meetings are held. I assume the people inside the hall know as much about the Philip Marshall case as I do, but assumptions are not facts. They're just unanswered questions. I was warned not to involve or question the Masons or the Order of the Eastern Star members in the Marshall murders. But when the spirit moves me to do something, I usually will. To be clear, I was not accusing the Masons or the Order of the Eastern Star of being involved in the murders. I just had a feeling that if I ever did speak to the right Mason, I would get some answers about the Marshall deaths. There is a Masonic building in just about every city and town in America. It's their job to know what happens in their area. At least in my opinion, it is. I have been told that I am wrong and no one knows anything about Philip Marshall. Okay. I took a walk down Main Street and got a chance to talk to some locals from the town. I was told that people in Murphy's were still in shock and trying to cope with what happened, but many had suspicions that Philip Marshall and his children were murdered. How did you know about Philip Marshall? I was asked. Oh, I read books similar to him, I responded. Be careful, someone from the town warned me. I asked, do you think he did it? There was a slight pause. While recognizing the many questions surrounding the case, this person found it easier to cope with the ordeal by thinking Marshall wouldn't do such a thing. This person also understood that there was something wrong with the official story of 911. The same person understood the risks Marshall was taking in challenging the official story. After I told this person that Marshall had basically expressed some concern for his safety, and we discussed a little bit about the World Trade Center, I got the general feeling that this person had the same doubts as me and many others. There were questions as to why no neighbors reported hearing any gunshots or any suspicious activities. It's possible no one communicated with Philip Marshall or his two children for 2 days before some of the teen's friends found Mr. Marshall lying in a pool of blood inside his house. I couldn't find Marshall's last two books, The Big Bamboozle or False Flag 911, in the local bookstore. More copies are on the way, I was assured. I realized I wasn't the only one asking for his books. I still have not found a copy of Lakefront Airport, but I know they exist somewhere. And of course, since the writing of that, I have found a copy of Lakefront Airport, and I have read it, and I did some videos on that too. 4 years ago, Philip Marshall, under the username Flyer82, posted on the truthmove.org forum about his first nonfiction book, False Flag 911. Marshall wrote 1. My agenda as an airline pilot is to find the culprits in the attack against my fellow aviators. 2. To reopen hearings with witnesses under oath and to uncover FBI files and the blacked out portions about the Saudis in the congressional report. The official story. Philip Marshall allegedly shot his two teenage children, Alex Marshall, 17, and Michaela Marshall, 14, his dog, and then himself, inside his home in Murphy's, California, while his estranged wife was out of the country. The last time some friends heard from Alex or Michaela Marshall was on Thursday, January 31st, 2013. On Saturday, February 2nd, 2013, at 3:10 p.m., concerned friends of the two teenagers called the Calaveras Sheriff's Office after knocking on the front door of the Marshall home. Through the front door window, they saw Philip Marshall lying face up on the floor in a pool of blood. Deputies went to the residency on a suspicious circumstance welfare check. The two teenagers were allegedly found on the couch next to each other. They also found the dog deceased in the master bedroom. It seemed clear to me that Philip Marshall was associated with many black operations in the 1980s as a Learjet captain involving the Central Intelligence Agency. A former guest on Coast to Coast AM, Marshall's biography for that site states Marshall has researched 30 years of covert government activities, a revolving door of Wall Street tricksters, media moguls, and their well-funded politicians into every branch of our government. Post 9/11, Marshall has led a comprehensive 10-year study into the technical plan used by the 9/11 hijackers and is the leading aviator expert on the September 11th attack. The same bio also describes Marshall as a former government special activities contract pilot. The Santa Barbara Review's article on the alleged double murder suicide stated, the veteran pilot confided that he was concerned about his 10-year independent 9/11 study and most recent book since they pointed to the Saudis and the Bush intelligence communities as the executioners of the attack that defeated all U.S. military defenses on September 11, 2001. Marshall said he knew his book might cause some people to take issue with him. The coroner in the Marshall case told reporters it did appear as though Alex and Michaela were sleeping when the bodies were found. A forthcoming toxology report will show if Marshall or his two children were drugged. The story of Philip Marshall continues after his death. It should be easy to prove whether or not Marshall fired a gun that day. If he didn't, then perhaps he did not do what he is accused of, obviously. If someone or a group of people suicided Philip Marshall or murdered his two children and dog, then I would call that a professional hit. While I have my doubts about the suicide and murders, I cannot prove that Marshall was suicided, nor can I conclusively say that he was guilty of a double murder suicide based on the little evidence we have been given. The investigation into the alleged double murder suicide begins with the assumption that there is no foul play. The investigation is built around this conspiracy theory. In The Big Bamboozle, Philip Marshall writes, as a former operative in the group's notorious covert missions, including Iran-Contra and the sting of Pablo Escobar, I recognized that this smoke rising over Manhattan might add a major piece to my large jigsaw puzzle of evidence. Philip Marshall's first wife, Ann Coluner, told the Union Democrat she did not believe Marshall was a contract pilot. She believes her former husband provided a taxi service for Barry Seal, a man who worked in black ops smuggling drugs in and out of the country for the CIA and DEA. So how much did Coluner really know about her ex-husband? In the same interview, she admits that Marshall was not always honest with her when it came to his travels with Barry Seal. He'd be in one city and tell me he was in another, she told the Union Democrat. Coloner, who lives in Louisiana, was also surprised at the allegation. I don't see him doing that without being in an altered state. Philip Marshall began flying at age 15. The young pilot's first flight instructor was his father. On 9/11, after the second plane struck the World Trade Center, Marshall's father called him from New Orleans, a city where Philip was raised. From his Santa Barbara home in Northern California, Marshall picked up the phone. Phil, thank God you're home. Marshall's father added, there's more planes missing. In Richard Clarke's gatekeeping book, Against All Enemies, Clarke wrote that on 9/11 there were more than a dozen planes missing that day. As Marshall watched the event of September 11th unfold, he began to make connections between the terrorist attack and the fictional book he was about to publish called Lakefront Airport. Even before 9/11, Marshall had a sick feeling that America was in deep trouble, that a group with this new Bush administration, just like the old Bush administration, was an incredibly dangerous, brazen bunch of well-connected, well-educated ideologists. They were on a power trip similar to others in world history, but as far as I knew, this was the first attempt by what our founders had labeled domestic enemies to overthrow the Constitution and place America under their own absolute power. Many news reports were quick to echo what the Calaveras County Sheriff's Department claimed. Philip Marshall killed his two teenage kids, his dog, and himself. What we know is that there is no motive for the allegation, and we know that this conclusion was made the same day that the three bodies were found. The family dog was found in the master bedroom. The two kids were found sleeping on a couch in the front room, 6 feet away from each other, and Marshall was found face up near the couch in a pool of blood with his gun next to him. The biggest conspiracy theory here is the one that the police have come up with. Calaveras County Coroner Kevin Raggio said the two teenagers, Alex and Michaela, appeared to be sleeping. Joel Metzger of CalaverasEnterprise.com pointed out it's highly unlikely Marshall could have shot one without waking the other. Metzger reported that Sergeant Chris Hewitt was asked about this. Hewitt responded by saying he could not comment on it. It's part of an active investigation. But I thought they had concluded their investigation when they determined that Marshall was guilty of a double murder suicide. Perhaps the investigation is still ongoing because the police have no motive, no suicide note, and no indication that Marshall fit the profile of someone who murdered the two closest people to him, his own flesh and blood. Some would say that Marshall did this because of the separation and future divorce of his second wife, Shawn Marshall. That is a theory to which there is no evidence. Critics point to a December 2008 dispute Marshall had with Shawn and her sister Erin over the custody battle of the kids. Philip Marshall was accused by Shawn and Erin of slapping Erin at the Forest Meadows home. Marshall was detained, not arrested, and eventually released. A month earlier, in November, Philip Marshall hid in the shower of his house with a video camera as Shawn entered the home and allegedly stole a bottle of 6 20 milligram pills of Cadian, a very strong opiate. The police were called out and eventually arrested Sean Marshall, charging her with petty theft, trespassing, and possession of drugs without prescription. The charges were dropped on September 28, 2009. When asked by police why she took the pills, she told them she hid the pills in a tree and planned on giving them to her lawyer. A divorce hearing was scheduled for February 25, 2013, almost a month after the deaths. Sean Marshall filed for divorce on October 2012. Though the police have no motive, and it's possible they never will, there are theories that one of the reasons why Philip would kill his kids is over the divorce. Again, this makes little sense considering the age of the children. If Philip Marshall was as close with his kids as friends and neighbors claim, then he didn't have to worry about losing his teenage children in the custody battle. Alex was 17, almost an adult who could make his own decisions as to where he wanted to live and why. Though Michaela was 14, I believe the judge would have asked her where she wanted to reside with the mother or father, and both the parents don't live that far from each other either. Since the two teens went to a high school near both Marshall residences and were active in both social and sporting activities, there's little doubt the teens would want to finish high school at Bret Harte Union High. Philip Marshall was heavily involved in the school activities as well. So for me, the if I can't have the kids, nobody can theory is weak. Very weak. Bob Friel, security guard at the gated community at Forest Meadows, told the Union Democrat, I would never have guessed anything like this. He describes the Marshalls as a normal family. Bret Harte Union High School's assistant principal, Kelly Osborne, is quoted as saying, it just doesn't make sense. A neighbor named Mike Brown described Mr. Marshall as a dedicated father, and Marita Calloway of the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors said Marshall was very involved with his kids. Joel Metzger of CalaverasEnterprises.com reports that Calloway also said, quote, the actions don't match the person we know, and, quote, he loves his children. Next door neighbor Carolyn Greenwood said, I knew him long enough to know he was a regular guy. He was a good father, always there for his kids and a helpful neighbor. Marita Calloway, who also lives in the gated community, Forest Meadows, told the sheriff's captain that she truly felt somebody came in the house. While visiting Murphy's soon after the incident, Wayne Madsen learned that a side door was open when the bodies were found. The same day the bodies were found, the police released a statement claiming the reason for this murder-suicide is unknown at this time. So where is the motive provided by the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office? They have none. The people who live near Philip Marshall and communicated with him have a hard time believing Marshall would kill his two children. There is no suicide note and no motive. Also, no one heard any gunshots between Thursday, January 31st and Saturday, February 2nd, 2013. On February 3rd, Sergeant Chris Hewitt made it clear that the police investigating the crime do not believe there was foul play. Quote, all evidence and information at the scene confirmed that this was indeed a double murder-suicide, and there was no evidence to suggest there was an outside party who entered the house and committed a triple murder. I hope part of their evidence is gun residue found on Philip Marshall. Of course, the police can't even determine the time of death. They can only theorize on that too. It happened sometime between Thursday and Saturday. The autopsy results by Calaveras County Coroner Kevin Raggio confirmed what we already knew, that all four died from a single gunshot wound to the head. The toxicology report, which would not be released for a few more weeks, was expected to shed some light on what really happened to Marshall and his family. Until then, I don't see how anyone could have concluded this was a double murder-suicide. I believe Marshall, his two kids, and the family dog were murdered 1 or 2 days before the Super Bowl, which happened to take place in Marshall's hometown of New Orleans. There is just as much evidence to suggest foul play as there is to suggest a double murder-suicide. Yes, Marshall had a Glock 9mm registered in his name, but where is the ballistic evidence to prove Marshall fired the weapon? Even then, how could police rule out foul play the same day the bodies were found? On February 19th, Wayne Madsen told Alex Jones of Infowars.com, police said even before they had finished investigating the case, they permitted professional cleaners to come into the Marshall home to clean the premises. After that, there were 2 sets of vehicles seen at the Marshall home still conducting the investigation after the home was professionally cleaned. Madsen of the Wayne Madsen Report was in the town of Murphys right around the same time I was. On February 13th, Shawn Marshall and her sister were at Bret Hart Union High School near Murphys for a special ceremony for the two slain teens. The sister, Erin, gave some type of eulogy, and Shawn gave the closing statement. It's not clear if either two women think Philip Marshall was guilty or innocent of this crime. Shawn was quoted as saying by Joel Metzger, "Being in Turkey and getting this news, it was almost unbearable. When I heard of this devastation, there are no words ever to explain the emotions, the hurt, the regrets. I couldn't hear God at that moment. I couldn't hear his answers. Why? Why would you do this? Why them? Why me? Hug everyone. Love everyone. Be kind." Well, why blame God? Why not blame the ones who murdered Philip Marshall and his two kids? Shall we just trust in what the police say? Should we believe without evidence that Philip Marshall murdered his two children, his dog, and then shot himself on the right side of his head? Wayne Madsen was in Murphys the same day as the ceremony. That night, on February 13th, Madsen told InfoWars Nightly News host Jakari Jackson, quote, "That evening, somebody tried to break in through a sliding door at the back of the residence. It's quite clear that Marshall had something that somebody wanted so bad they were willing to kill him and his children and his family dog for." Conspiracy theories continue due to the unanswered questions, not because of Marshall's past. Examining Marshall's past brings us to Barry Seal. Barry Seal's wife once said that her husband flew the getaway plane out of Dallas after John F. Kennedy was killed. It's believed that Seal began flying for Black Ops missions in the 50s and hired Marshall in the 80s after Seal lost his pilot's license. Marshall told Coast to Coast that many of the contract pilots did not know what their planes were carrying. Both Seal and Marshall were involved in smuggling arms and drugs into South America. Barry Seal had ties to David Ferrie, who was also a pilot at one time. In 1967, David Ferrie was questioned by District Attorney Jim Garrison about his involvement in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Ferrie lied to Garrison about his whereabouts on November 22, 1963. Soon after Ferrie met with Garrison, Ferrie allegedly committed suicide. On February 19, 1986, Barry Seal was shot multiple times while attempting to exit his car. Seal was going to testify that George H.W. Bush was involved in smuggling operations. Barry Seal may have been involved in what is known as Operation 40, the alleged hit team that was ordered to kill JFK on November 22, 1963. Philip Marshall's fictional book Lakefront Airport is about Barry Seal and his CIA-connected smuggling operations involving contract pilots. According to page 152 of Philip Marshall's last book, The Big Bamboozle, quote, "Barry had some wild encounters with the world's most dangerous people. That included cocaine kingpins and intelligence community assassins." In Marshall's only fictional book, Lakefront Airport, he told the tales of Barry Seal's dealings and eventual sting on the notorious Pablo Escobar, as well as Mr. Seal's early days of smuggling marijuana and explosives and his dealings with Ollie North and George H.W. Bush's secret operations south of the border. On page 153 of The Big Bamboozle, Marshall refers to Barry Seal as his former boss. The third man from the left is my former boss, Barry Seal. This picture was taken in Mexico City on January 22nd, 1963, at the La Forma nightclub. Of the picture, Marshall writes, "Here may very well be the founding members of the Intelligence Community's Special Activities Division." This photo was taken 10 months before President John F. Kennedy was gunned down in Dallas. Some independent investigators believe that this was the assassination team, nicknamed Operation 40, that pulled it off. My trip to Murphys. My friend Patrick Henningsen of 21stCenturyWire.com said Murphys is probably the most picturesque town in Northern California. Well said. Wayne Madsen confirmed everything that I learned on my trip to Murphys and so much more. If not for Wayne's excellent work, I might have reserved some judgment for a later date. It's clear to me that many people in the town of Murphys do not believe the official story about Philip Marshall. I hope this revelation will help them consider that 9/11 was an inside job, as Marshall believed. He made direct ties between the hijackers, the flight training they received in the United States, and the Saudi Arabian government. It's believed the Saudis and others financed the terrorist operation that killed over 3,000 people, spawned two unconstitutional wars, created the Patriot Act, and made room for the NDAA legislation, where the president could detain anyone for working with terrorists, whether they are citizens of the United States or not. Due process died on 9/11. Even worse, many believe due process died a long time ago. On February 19th, Alex Jones told the Infowars.com audience, I talked to Colonel Marshall of the Defense Language School, different Marshall, by the way. He said, all I know is Muhammad Atta trained in my class. When Philip Marshall saw the second plane hit the World Trade Center, it would set him on a course to discover the truth about 9/11. He came to realize that the Osama bin Laden killing on May 2nd, 2011 was a farce. Philip Marshall was not killed because he wrote a book on 9/11. Many people have done that. Can we prove he was killed as part of a black op? Not at this time. Yet we know Marshall had dealings with black ops and that he knew a lot of key players in the Iran-Contra scandal and the sting of Pablo Escobar. One of the questions I have is how Marshall's children felt about their father's books. Apparently, on Michaela's Facebook page, there's a link to her father's books on 911. Finally, we have a tie-in to more gun control. This time, the high school where Alex and Michaela attended has created a bereavement fund that includes a scholarship for future students. One of the considerations for the scholarships is the students' view on gun control regulations in the community. This is a quote here. A bereavement fund for the siblings has been set up at the U.S. Bank branch in Angels Camp. Donations can be made out to Alex and Michaela and mailed to the bank at 580 South Main Street, Angels Camp, California, 95222. The donations will go towards the memorials and a student annual scholarship for Bret Harte High School. The funding will consider students who are involved with the promotion of mental health awareness and gun control regulations in the community, according to the organizers. Students were told instead of paying admission to that Friday school dance, they could donate to the bereavement fund. While I am happy there is a bereavement fund to honor the two teens and to help out other students, I am disgusted that the organizers would use such a tragic event to promote more gun regulations. With all the surrounding questions, what is the big picture here? What is the Big Bamboozle? Philip Marshall answers that in his book, The Big Bamboozle. Quote, the big picture was emerging as an empire with a confederacy of domestic enemies attempting a coup, a revolution against the United States. Phone interview with coroner Kevin Raggio by Chris Gordon. Chris Gordon, investigative researcher and We Are Change San Francisco member. The last facial expression is essential in determining the state of condition that the person was in when they died. Chris Gordon. Investigative researcher Chris Gordon from We Are Change San Francisco spoke to the coroner of Philip Marshall and his two teenage children. Chris Gordon called Calaveras County Coroner Kevin Raggio this Tuesday to ask some questions about the conspiracy theories surrounding the alleged double murder-suicide. To allege is to declare without proof, says John B. Wells, former host of Coast to Coast. The first question Chris asked the coroner was why the neighbors didn't hear any gunshots. There are 5 houses within close vicinity of the Marshall home. A neighbor across the street said he heard 2 suspicious noises on Friday night, February 1st, 2013, one day before the bodies of Philip, Alex, and Michaela Marshall were found. The Marshall house sits on a ridgetop facing the Stanislaus River Canyon. Mr. Raggio pointed out there's a lot of driveway in front of the house, which is about 30 or 40 feet off the road of Sandalwood Drive. In response to why neighbors didn't hear any gunshots, Raggio told Chris, you have to walk past the garage to get into the house. The house is all double pane windows. So with the doors closed, you've got a big garage there, number one. That's going to insulate the sound. You've got a big, substantial front door on the house. All dual pane windows. You're not going to hear much. Sergeant Chris Hewitt of the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office came to a similar conclusion, where he was quoted as saying, the houses are not very close together, and if they are well built and insulated with all the windows and doors closed, the shots would have been muffled. The coroner told Chris that gunshots, quote, would probably be more louder towards the front of the house. In the front of the house, there's nothing in front of them but a remote river canyon and probably nobody for 20 miles. Raggio also mentioned the neighbor across the street from the Marshall home who heard two suspicious noises on Friday night. There was a neighbor that did hear something strange that night, Raggio told Chris. The neighbor across the street heard something that got his attention, but him being in his house and the shots going off inside the Marshall home, you probably wouldn't notice. The neighbor, Jeff Woods, heard something strange twice in the same night, but didn't specify if the noises sounded like gunshots. According to Joel Metzger's article, Woods was in a downstairs room with the television on in the background when I heard an unusual noise. I stopped working and went upstairs, turned the lights on, and looked around. I didn't hear anything else, so I went back downstairs. Not long after that, I heard another strange noise. I muted the television and listened for a second without hearing anything else. When Chris Gordon asked Mr. Raggio if he thought Wood's comments had any credence, Raggio responded, "Yeah, why wouldn't it?" Exactly what type of strange noises did Mr. Woods hear? The last facial expression is going to be marked on your face, says Chris Gordon. Chris Gordon then steered the conversation towards the two teenagers. Both Alex and Michaela were found on a U-shaped couch, a couch that was most likely removed from the home on Super Bowl Sunday, apparently sleeping. Chris asked why the gunshots did not wake up one of the children. That I don't know. That I don't know at this point. That's something I'd like to think that they didn't hear. I don't know if they did or didn't. The first one probably didn't hear anything because I suspect they were probably asleep. So maybe one of them did hear. I don't know. The last facial expression is essential in determining the state of condition that the person was in when they died. Raggio echoed what police have been saying. As far as I know, there was no silencer of any kind. Kristen wondered how one of the two would not wake up to the sound of a gunshot that was a few feet away from their ears. Do you find that suspicious at all? No. Chris clarified the question. You don't find it suspicious that a gunshot wouldn't wake up a child? Well, not. I don't. In looking at the scene, I mean, yeah, it's mysterious in my mind, but I don't find it suspicious. As far as it makes me wonder, like I said, it's mysterious. It makes me wonder, if one of them heard anything. But do I find it suspicious? I don't find it suspicious. I don't suspect that from what I can see. It is what they, what we determined it was, murder suicide. Who is they? Or did the coroner simply misspeak before he corrected himself in saying we determined the cause of death? How many people does it take to determine the cause of death? From my understanding, only the coroner determines this. Not they or we. We could have meant the assistant coroner. The next question was if there was a suicide note found at the crime scene. The coroner responded, not to my knowledge, no. My job is to determine the cause of death. I don't deal with the criminal aspect of the whole thing. The autopsy determined that all Philip Marshall, Alex Marshall, and Michaela Marshall and the family dog died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Raggio confirmed it's his job to determine the cause of death. Is it possible someone was helping him decide what happened here? At this point, I don't know. Mr. Raggio believed this was a double murder suicide. It appears to be what it is. Chris then asked about the evidence for the double murder suicide since there was no suicide note. Well, one thing I can tell you, and then you'll probably have to get the rest from the sheriff's office, but when you shoot yourself, you're standing up. There's a considerable amount of blood splatter that goes in every direction. The blood splatter, unless somebody was floating, they would have, in my mind, had to have tracked in the blood splatter. Marshall was standing up when he allegedly shot himself? So from your determination, it seemed like Marshall was standing up when he shot himself, Chris asked. Probably, yeah. Kevin Raggio doesn't believe a foreign country like Saudi Arabia staged the deaths to appear as a double murder suicide. I've heard all these conspiracy theories and all this other stuff. In my mind, if you're a foreign country, for instance, and you're coming after Philip Marshall, you'd send somebody in. I'm Italian, so I'd send for the boys in Sicily. They'd come in and, you know what I mean? It'd be like Sopranos. The boy from Italy would come and he doesn't give a damn if it looks like a murder suicide or not. They're going to put bullets in your head and they're going to leave. That's going to be it. But in this case, why would you go out of your way to stage it as a murder suicide? According to a Santa Barbara View exclusive, Philip Marshall expressed concern for his life, but he wasn't worried about a foreign country. He was more concerned about people inside the United States. And here's a quote from the Santa Barbara View. During the editing and pre-marketing process of Marshall's book, he expressed some degree of paranoia because the nonfiction work accused the George W. Bush administration of being in cahoots with the Saudi intelligence community in training the hijackers who died in the planes used in the attacks. Chris Gordon thanked Mr. Raggio for his time and for answering the questions to the best of his ability. I'm not an expert, Raggio told him. I just happen to be the guy who was the coroner there. He said the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office is doing a very thorough investigation in light of the conspiracy theory, so forth. I know they've taken some extra steps, and you'd have to ask them to elaborate on that. That's about all I can tell you. Chris Gordon has assured me he's going to keep asking questions about the strange anomalies in this case. Chris is not satisfied with the official story given to the public. Neither am I. How about you? In the near future, we will try to find out more about these extra steps the authorities have taken. Chris Gordon noticed the autopsy report can be purchased for $10. He asked Raggio, is it possible that we could purchase an autopsy report for Philip Marshall? I think you could, probably, eventually, yeah. It's not available as of yet? Not yet, no. Do you have an idea of when it will be? At this point, no. Chris Gordon has worked at 5 different mortuaries. He's seen a lot of dead bodies up close. He says part of the answer to this case could be found on the facial expressions of the deceased. It would be very easy to determine if one of the kids were woken up by the gunshot going off 6 feet away by their facial expression, Chris told me. It's easy to tell if someone was sleeping when they died. Their eyes would be closed. That was probably how they were able to determine so quickly that the children were sleeping. If they appeared to be sleeping, they probably were found with their eyes closed. But what if someone just changed the facial expressions after killing the 4 family members? I asked. I'm a mortician, Chris told me. I make people's shocked and traumatic faces look like they're sleeping. It's a process. But surely a professional or professionals could have manipulated their faces to make it look as if they were sleeping, right? If it was done, it would leave a trail. You'd be able to determine that, he told me. 1 month later. 1 month after the alleged double murder suicide, there was no clear motive for the allegations against Philip Marshall. I became impatient waiting for the toxicology reports. Chris Gordon explained to me, in cases like this, where there's a suspicious death, the coroner has to remove the vital organs, take samples, and then send them off to a lab to determine whether or not there were drugs in the system of the deceased. As we waited for the toxicology reports, we still didn't know if the police could prove Philip Marshall fired a weapon in the final days of his life. A ballistic test would quickly determine if Philip Marshall fired his 9mm Glock pistol sometime between January 31st and February 2nd, when the bodies were found. The coroner believed Marshall was standing up when he shot himself. Marshall was found in a pool of blood, lying face up. If Marshall shot himself, then fell to the ground, he would have head wounds to help prove that. But the body has since been cremated. Here's a quote from Philip Marshall's book, False Flag 911. Even if I'd had no other reason to investigate, my airline family deserved an honest account of the attack. I might add that we also deserve this because 9/11 has been used against us ever since, in a running nightmare of contrived bankruptcy, draconian working conditions, and hostile management. Last media release. Police promised that the latest media release would put to rest conspiracy theories about a triple murder in the Marshall case. We waited almost 2 months for their evidence to be released to the public. Evidence that included the coroner's autopsy results, the toxicology report, and hopefully paraffin and ballistics tests. Also, people wanted a motive for the theory that Philip Marshall shot his 2 children, the family dog, and then himself. Sergeant Chris Hewitt confirmed there was no suicide note found at the residence. So the question is, how did the police come to the conclusion that Philip Marshall was guilty of a double murder suicide? Here's a quote from Philip Marshall on Coast to Coast. There's definitely a movement going on. It seems like they're planning for something. They're definitely hooking into the counties, local police departments. It's gonna be one big federal eye watching us when we should be watching them. It's Philip Marshall, Coast to Coast AM. Investigative researcher Chris Gordon and the host of Hard Talk, Walter Bradley, traveled with me back to Murphys, California, exactly 1 month after my first trip to the small town. Our mission was to give the people a closer view of the Marshall home and see how far apart the neighbors' houses are. We learned of a 5K run in honor of Alex and Michaela Marshall on Sunday, March 24th, 2013. We spoke to locals in the area. Most of them did not want to talk to us, but a few would. We visited the Marshall house and saw a car in the driveway, one box outside the front door, a vase with two flowers in it, writing on the front door, and a few empty rooms. We saw freshwater puddles in front of the house and a hose wrapped around the front porch railing. Philip Marshall's silver Volvo was still parked in the driveway. Chris Gordon and Walter Bradley knocked on the front door, but no one answered. Here's some of my notes that I took. A small white porcelain frog sits in front of the front door. On the white door, someone wrote "Love Wins" inside of a big heart. Looking through the front window, you can see all the way to the back porch. A long hallway with hard glass floors leads to a living room where a black couch faces the back porch. A glass table and black chairs are near the couch, and it's possible some things were removed from this room. Cleaning items were also visible through a nearby window. Behind the living room is the kitchen area. Some of the bedrooms are probably on the level below, and at least one room on this level, the highest level, was empty, except for one white blanket on the floor. The neighbor, where Wayne Madsen took the first photograph of the Marshall house, did not answer the door either. Comparing Madsen's photograph to what the three of us saw, not much has changed between the time Madsen was there and when we arrived almost a month later. The barbecue pit and the porch wing had not moved since the photo was taken in early February by Wayne Madsen. There were two versions of the media release sent out by the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office on Super Bowl Sunday, February 2nd. A third release was supposed to be available sometime around March 22nd, according to what Sergeant Chris Hewitt of the Sheriff's Office told Chris Gordon over the phone. The new media release should include a toxicology report. We hope tests have been done to determine if Philip Marshall fired a weapon before he died. More answers will be found in the police report and testimony of what the friends of Alex and Michaela saw when they went to the Marshall home on February 2nd, 2013. From the media release above, we know the eyewitnesses saw Philip Marshall lying in a pool of blood. I would also like to know if the eyewitnesses saw Alex and Michaela sleeping on the couch as well. The first two media releases describe how the police found the Marshall children, but not if the eyewitnesses saw the Marshall children. Independent researcher Dan Hennon found a blog about three family members who went to the Marshall home on February 14th, one day after Wayne Madsen witnessed someone breaking into the Marshall home. Hennon found this information. Two family members and a friend of Marshall's estranged wife reportedly entered the home and rifled through drawers and boxes of papers in the garage in search of something. Forest Meadows Homeowners Association President David Turner was alerted to their presence and told them they had no permission to enter the premises. Turner also remarked that they were, quote, making quite a mess. According to a neighbor, the estranged in-laws claimed they were looking for bills that had to be paid. On March 20th, Dan posted in the Facebook group Justice for Philip, Alex, and Michaela Marshall. I was able to get through to David Turner today. He was a president of the association for 3 years and is now the treasurer. I asked him if he could clarify a little further into what happened that day when he had to tell the family members they didn't have permission to be in the home. He responded with, I'm not interested in getting into that. Now, the coroner told Chris Gordon that Philip Marshall shot himself while standing up, quote, most likely. Would that mean Philip Marshall shot himself while standing up and somehow the gun fell under him as his body hit the ground? Because one report claimed the gun was found underneath Marshall. If Marshall was standing up, then the coroner should find some wounds from the impact when Marshall hit the hardwood floor after shooting himself. An employee at a local business told us that Marshall was right-handed and grabbed stuff off of the shelf with his right hand too. This person saw Mr. Marshall sign his credit card receipt with his right hand. We asked for the video that showed which hand Marshall signed with, but the employees said they only keep surveillance videos for 30 days. The space between the Marshall house and the neighbor's house is important as well. Calaveras County Coroner Kevin Raggio told Chris Gordon, quote, "You have to walk past the garage to get into the house. The house is all double pane windows, so with the door closed, you've got a big garage there, number one. That's going to insulate the sound. You've got a big substantial front door on the house, all dual pane windows. You're not going to hear much." I agree that the houses are not very close. There is a long driveway that leads down to the Marshall home. If anyone heard the gunshots, it should be the neighbor next door, the house to the right of the satellite image of Marshall's house. When we arrived to the area, the home next to the Marshall residence was for sale with the sale pending sign. I'm not sure how long the house has been on the market, and it could have been before or after the tragedy on Sandalwood Drive. The writing on the door is the creepiest thing I saw on my trip back to Murphy's. A few people have mentioned that I may be making too much of someone writing "Love Wins" on Philip Marshall's front door. But what do you think? Did love win? I think as long as we keep searching for the truth, love wins. If we ignore the questions that surround the Philip Marshall case, I don't see how love wins. Wayne Madsen told Alex Jones of Infowars.com that Philip Marshall was estranged from his wife, but it was very amicable. The two trips to Turkey are interesting. Though the Marshalls' first divorce hearing was set for February 25th, the couple had recently traveled to the country together. Interviewed by Jakari Jackson on Infowars Nightly News, Madsen spoke about Sean Marshall's relationship with her husband. The estranged wife was actually in Turkey, Madsen tells Jakari Jackson, on a trip that Phil Marshall arranged because he was trying to set her up in an import business to import linens and soaps, especially soaps and saffron from Turkey. Her background was in buying such things once for Nordstrom department store. So it wasn't that it was an acrimonious divorce, they were very friendly. He was trying to set her up in business so she'd have something to do. Okay, I'm going to read Philip Marshall's obituary. Philip R. Marshall, Philip Randall Marshall, 54, died tragically along with his son Alex, 17, and daughter Michaela, 14, at their home in Murphy's, California on February 1st, 2013. Phil was born in New Orleans on August 2nd, 1958, the son of Carl Marshall of Covington, Louisiana, and the late Catherine Olson Marshall. He is survived by his father, his brother Robert C. Marshall, and his sister Virginia Marshall Morgan and their families. A memorial service will be held at 3 p.m. on Friday, March 29th at the Lakefront Gazebo in Mandeville, Louisiana. Phil spent his early years in the New Orleans area. He was a graduate of Mandeville High School on the North Shore, where he was an all-star receiver. He briefly attended Southwestern University at Lafayette and worked offshore before pursuing his passion, flying. Phil worked his way up from a student pilot to instructor, then to charter pilot on Lear jets until he was hired by a major airline. He progressed to become a full captain on jumbo jets, flying around the world for United Airlines. Phil lived in Dallas, Miami, Chicago, San Francisco, Lake Tahoe, Santa Barbara, and Murphy's, California. He was a devoted father to his children and spent many hours on the ball field as a little league coach. He was a lifelong diehard Saints fan, attending games as a kid, starting from John Gilliam's opening day kickoff return for a touchdown, through the Billy Kilmer, Archie Manning, Saints and Drew Brees days, and culminating with the thrill of the Super Bowl victory in 2010. Phil even organized and flew the free Sean Payton plane last summer and fall. Phil authored 3 books that he self-published, and he definitely was not afraid to tackle extremely controversial subjects. It was published in the Times-Picayune from March 15th to March 17th, 2013. Sergeant Chris Hewitt's third press release on the Marshall investigation became available on March 29, 2013. The release was designed to shed light on the evidence against Philip Marshall, who is accused by the Calaveras County Sheriff's Department of a double murder-suicide. Allegedly, Marshall shot his 2 teenage children once in the head, shot the family dog in a bedroom, then shot himself on the right side of the head near the front door with the gun upside down. The police claim the gun was upside down when Marshall shot himself, where they say, quote, the Glock handgun was sent to the California Department of Justice Crime Lab for fingerprint analysis and is scheduled for DNA and ballistics examination, result pending on the DNA and ballistics. The fingerprint analysis positively identifies Philip Marshall's fingerprints on the interior plastic carton of the ammunition box and the gun magazine. In regards to prints on the gun, the Department of Justice Lab analysts explained, the only usable friction ridge impressions remaining in this case were two patent impressions appearing on the Glock 19 handgun. These patent impressions were visible on the slide area of the handgun upon the initial examination. The patent impressions lack sufficient quality and quantity of friction ridge detail for identification purposes, but are usable for elimination purposes. Subject Philip Randall Marshall could not be eliminated as the source of these two patent impressions due to similarities in ridge flow and ridge characteristics in agreement with his left thumb and left index finger. So the lab analyst for the California Department of Justice specifically mentions Philip's left thumb and left index finger. All they say is that they cannot rule out Philip Marshall from being the person who used that gun. Once again, they have no proof that he used it. All they can do is say that we cannot rule him out. So that's a lot of trickery right there. Then they explained how a man could shoot himself with a gun pointed upside down. The investigators also claim it's normal for people to shoot themselves this way, where they're quoted, the inverted, upside down positioning of the handgun is a natural body arm posture of someone shooting themselves and is consistent with him having shot himself. The media release further states that Philip Marshall suffered a point blank gunshot wound to the right side of his head. Investigators determined the firearm was being held upside down as indicated by the muzzle impression found on Philip's head. The blood spatter and a lack of displacement or disruption found at the scene proved to investigators that no other persons were in close enough proximity to have shot Philip Marshall. I strongly believe that the Calaveras County Sheriff, Gary Kuntz, should make a public statement about the lack of evidence against Philip Marshall. Without a motive, a coroner's report, or paraffin test, Philip Marshall was accused of shooting his two children and the family dog before turning the gun on himself. So here's my question to you, Mr. Kuntz. Does it concern you that your officers came to the conclusion that Philip Marshall was guilty of a double murder suicide within hours of finding the bodies inside the Marshall residence? That should concern every parent on this planet. Okay? Pinal Air Park. Did Philip Marshall reveal something he wasn't supposed to? Pinal Air Park is a known CIA front, but Marshall also revealed that he still had connections in the spook world that provided him information. It's possible Pinal Air Park was where some of the 9/11 hijackers trained for their suicide mission. It's also possible that Marshall had information that would prove that the hijackers were trained at this air park, but it's not certain. What is certain is he was working on a fourth book, and I'm sure somewhere out there someone either has a copy or has read it. Possibly Senator Bob Graham. I have some connections that remain in the spook world, Philip Marshall told John B. Wells on Coast to Coast AM in 2012. There's a lot of contractors out there. Blackwater is one of them. There's quite a few other operators. So I was getting information from, it's a pretty tight circle. Aviation's a pretty tight circle in itself, but this particular strain of pilot, we keep in touch. Let's just put it that way. And I started getting hints of this Pinal Air Base from about 3 guys that worked in that field. I have to be very careful about that because they still provide information to me. Philip Marshall went to visit the air park sometime between 2006 and 2007. He told John B. Wells, there's this airport out in the middle of nowhere. It's a triangular airport that has 3 runways on it, and there's about 100 airliners there in a storage right now. Now, certain people at Pinal Air Park told Marshall that many times people try to take pictures of that airport and they'll send a car out there and confiscate the camera and all kinds of bad activities. Well, you can visit the Big Bamboozle Facebook page to see the photos Mr. Marshall took on his trip to Pinal Air Park. Marshall told John B. Wells that Pinal Air Park is a, quote, longtime CIA operated airport. There's a lot of controversy about trying to shut it down years ago. People that are on the board of directors are CIA people, so it has a long connection, all the way back to Air America. Philip Marshall, 911. No clear evidence against him. The Calaveras County Sheriff's Office prepared a 6-page statement on the Marshall investigation and released it on March 29, 2012. Sheriff Gary Kuntz and Sean Marshall Plummer, mother of the 2 deceased children, reviewed the third media release prepared by Sergeant Chris Hewitt before it was given to the public. When officers arrived at the Marshall home, they found Philip Marshall lying face up with a close-range gunshot wound on the right side of his head. Police claimed the gun was inverted, upside down. Marshall was found face up near the couch where his deceased children appeared to be sleeping, under blankets on a U-shaped sectional couch. The gun was found with a bullet in the chamber with an empty magazine. In Marshall's bedroom closet, police found a 50-round box of ammunition with 43 unused bullets. 3 expended casings were found in the living room near Marshall and his children. 1 expended casing was found in the master bedroom near the dog. A 5th unexpended bullet was found on the laundry room floor. So 6 spent bullets are accounted for, with 1 round missing from the 50-round box of ammunition. The box of ammo was found on a shelf on top of an open safe. Outside the safe, where they found the box of the ammunition, they also found a wedding ring resting on top of the box. According to the new media release by the Calaveras County Sheriff's Department, there were no signs of forced entry into the Marshall home. All the doors were closed, but some were unlocked. Quote, it did not appear that the house or any of the furniture had been ransacked. Police are relying on directional blood spatter to help prove their allegations against Philip Marshall. Blood cast off from his head was found on and around his body. Many people might find it strange that the Glock 9mm handgun was found underneath Marshall, because they are quoted as saying Marshall was found lying on his back in the living room behind a sectional couch. The gun was located under his right side midsection. Now, the muzzle impression left on Philip Marshall's skin helped determine the proximity of the gun to Marshall's head and the angle of the muzzle. Based on how they found the gun impression on Marshall's head and the quote lack of voids and blood disruptions, end quote, investigators concluded that no disruptions or voids were found in the high and low velocity blood spatter patterns. And this proves to them that there was no 4th person involved in this incident. Let me repeat that. Based on how they found the gun impression on Marshall's head and the lack of voids and blood disruptions, investigators concluded no disruptions or voids were found in the high or low velocity blood spatter patterns. And this proves to them that there was no 4th person involved in this incident. Apparently, Marshall held the gun upside down. The only fingerprints lab analysts found were of Marshall's left thumb and index finger, located on the slide of the gun. Also known as racking the slide, this only proves Marshall cocked the gun. They could not positively identify Marshall's fingerprints on the trigger of the Glock 9mm. The weapon. The Fiocchi Glock 9mm handgun is the alleged weapon used by Philip Marshall. In October 2011, Marshall purchased the Glock 9mm handgun from a gun store in Turlock, California. The gun was registered to him. On January 27, 2013, Marshall was videotaped purchasing ammunition from a Big 5 sporting goods store in Sonora, California. Police believe Marshall was wearing the same clothing on January 27th as he was when found on February 2, 2013. He paid cash for the ammunition, and police found a receipt for the purchase inside of Marshall's car. This is the same car 3 independent investigators saw in front of Philip Marshall's home on March 9, 2013. The Calaveras County Sheriff's Department believes Philip Marshall's gun was upside down when he shot himself on the right side of the head. Philip Marshall suffered a point-blank gunshot wound to the right side of his head. Investigators determined the firearm was being held upside down as indicated by the muzzle impression found on Philip's head. The blood spatter and a lack of displacement or disruption found at the scene proved to investigators that no other person were in close enough proximity to have shot Philip Marshall. The department also mentions that ballistics tests are still forthcoming, according to the latest media release, where they say the Glock handgun was sent to the California Department of Justice Crime Lab for fingerprint analysis and is scheduled for DNA and ballistics examination, results pending on the DNA and ballistics. The fingerprint analysis positively identifies Marshall's fingerprints on the interior plastic carton of the ammunition box and the gun magazine. The placement of the patent impressions is very important. They are visible on the slide area. Subject Philip Randall Marshall could not be eliminated as the source of these two patent impressions due to similarities in ridge flow and ridge characteristics in agreement with his left thumb and left index finger. The report specifically mentions Marshall's left thumb and left index finger, but they tell us Marshall shot himself on the right side. Now here comes the lack of evidence. There is no sufficient quality and quantity of friction detail for identification purposes. In other words, they cannot positively state that Philip Marshall's fingerprints were found on the weapon. Except for the left thumb and left index finger, there's proof he cocked the gun, but no proof he shot it. Ballistics tests are still forthcoming along with the DNA examination. As of today, the Department of Justice results and possible conclusions are still pending. This is more reason to prove a quick and incomplete conclusion presented by the Calaveras County Sheriff's Department. The investigators determined it was possible for the children to be shot within 2 seconds, within a few feet from each other, without one of them waking up. They also believe that 4 gunshots would be muffled inside the house, and that's why neighbors didn't report hearing any gunfire. The closest neighbors live about 50 feet away from the Marshall residence. Police performed tests inside Philip Marshall's house to see if one neighbor would be able to hear gunfire from next door. The unidentified neighbor did hear gunshots, but didn't think the noise would be loud enough to wake him if sleeping. The neighbor went on to say that despite the fact that the neighbor is a very light sleeper, the neighbor would not have been awakened by the noise. Nothing is mentioned about the suspicious noise one neighbor heard. According to one of Joel Metzger's articles on the Marshall case, quote, the neighbor, Jeff Woods, heard something strange twice in the same night, but didn't specify if the noise sounded like gunshots, end quote. Now, Woods was in a downstairs room with the television on in the background when I heard an unusual noise. I stopped working and went upstairs, turned the lights on, and looked around. I didn't hear anything else, so I went back downstairs. Not too long after that, I heard another strange noise. I muted the television and listened for a second without hearing anything else. Philip Marshall was last seen on January 31st. Alex's last documented communication was by instant messaging on January 31st at 10:40 p.m. Michaela's last documented communication via cellular phone was on January 31st at 10:10 p.m. She took a cell phone self-portrait at 10:55 p.m. On page 1 of the 6-page media release, the police go into details about the sister of Philip Marshall's wife, Sean Erin Chamberlain's allegations against Philip Marshall during late 2008 and early 2009. How this relates to the incident that happened about 3 years later is unclear to me. Most of the incidents reported are from Erin, not Sean Marshall. The bias against Philip Marshall is clear, as the police do not even mention Philip Marshall's incident a month before the alleged physical altercation in 2008-2009 with Erin Chamberlain. In that incident, Mr. Marshall tried to have Sean arrested for breaking into his home at Forest Meadows. Marshall accused Sean of stealing Cadian pills from the house. Here's a quote. In 2008, Philip Marshall hid in the shower of his house with a video camera as Sean entered the home and allegedly stole a bottle of 6 20-milligram pills of Cadian, a very strong opiate. Now, it was right around this time that all of the other allegations against Philip Marshall were reported to police. Why was there no mention of this incident in the third media release? while there was an extensive detailed account of the allegations against Philip Marshall. In fact, in the entire list of police involvement during late 2008 and early 2009, there is only one mention of Sean Marshall reporting anything. In fact, in the entire list of police involvement during late 2008 and early 2009, there is only one mention of Sean Marshall reporting anything. December 7, 2008, Sean Marshall reported that Philip violated the emergency protection order. After reading the 12 reports mentioned, I'm left with a strange feeling that the police are trying to mold a motive out of circumstantial hearsay. Do they have the evidence to convict Philip Marshall of a double murder suicide in a court of law? The answer is no. From January 2009 to February 2nd, 2013, when police arrive and find the deceased, there appears to be no further police involvement with the Marshall family. January 2nd, 2009, there's a civil standby is requested by Philip to pick up Alex from Sean. He requested that deputy call Sean and tell her to turn the kids over without a problem. So what was so special about 2008 and 2009? As police report, Sean Marshall initiated divorce proceedings against Philip Marshall in 2008. She withdrew the request in 2009. In October of 2012, she reinstituted the divorce process, at which time Philip Marshall moved back to his house in Forest Meadows. There was a divorce hearing set for February 25th, 2013. Debt kill. The police explained Marshall's financial situation based on documents they found on the kitchen counter. Here's what they say. These documents included a list of financial debts he owed, dated 2/01/13 and totaled $67,000, as well as child support related documents and information. Doesn't say much. Marshall wrote in a spiral notebook, Debt Kill. Wayne Madsen reported that Marshall's house payments were up to date, and the police do not mention any issue with the Internal Revenue Service. But they do say that a handwritten note was found inside of a spiral binder noting the debt amount and a handwritten comment stating debt kill. Authorities confiscated a laptop and a desktop computer and sent them to the high-tech task force in Sacramento for forensic analysis. The results are still pending. The police said the computers, described as a desktop and a laptop, were seized by detectives during the search of the home and sent to the law enforcement high-tech task force in Sacramento for forensic analysis. The results of the analysis are pending. So it's possible the police removed the bloody couch from the house to perform some type of tests in a crime lab, but they never state if they removed anything from the Marshall residence. The police returned to the scene of the crime recently to recreate how Alex and Michaela were killed. This leads us back to the mysterious cleaning crew that Wayne Madsen talked about. Madsen reported that a local professional cleaning service was at the Marshall house on Super Bowl Sunday, February 3rd, and spent a couple of days cleaning the Marshall residence, which was also a crime scene at the time. I suppose the only motive the police have is that Philip Marshall was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. They believe Marshall suffered from some kind of mental illness and point to his prescription narcotic pain medication as evidence. Here's what they say. According to records obtained, Marshall was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Additionally, the report stated that he suffered periods of depression and mania, which led to his dismissal or grounding as a pilot in September of 2006. Detectives also shared some information about Philip Marshall's medical records, where they said his medical records suggest that he also suffered from some sort of mental illness, drug dependency, anxiety, and depression. He was prescribed antidepressant medications for his mental health. During mid-year 2012 through January 2013, he frequented the medical clinics seeking additional pain medications. The media release states that Philip Marshall was under the care of a doctor for several years and speculates on mental health issues Marshall allegedly had. Yet this was not enough evidence for police to come up with a clear motive for the allegations of a double murder suicide. It's unclear if the detectives talked to Marshall's doctor, but they did consult a different doctor about what might happen if Marshall combined antidepressants with prescribed narcotics. The police even sourced the FDA's research for the sudden outburst that led to the alleged double murder suicide. The Food and Drug Administration, which has not been friendly towards natural medicines, agrees that changes in psychotropic medications could result in suicide, hostility, or psychosis. This hasn't stopped the approval of psychotropic medications, of course. So here is the final conclusion of the investigators in charge of solving this crime. Yet, in my opinion, from the beginning of this case, investigators have only sought to prove their theory, not to find the truth. Here's what they say. There was no evidence to support a theory that anyone else could have committed this crime, or that any other persons were present at the time of the shootings. Michaela and Alex Marshall both appeared to be sleeping at the time they were shot, indicating no signs of a struggle with a possible intruder. There was no evidence of a struggle with Philip Marshall and no signs of forced entry into the home. Various items of value were still present inside the home, and no evidence of any additional weapons was found. Lastly, there was no evidence that Philip Marshall or his children were moved or repositioned after the shooting, which would also indicate an altered crime scene. Based on the final findings of the investigators, evidence shows that Philip Marshall and not an outside fourth person shot and killed Michaela, Alex, and the family dog, and then himself. To conclude, it is determined that this case was a double murder suicide. Wow. Based on what? There's plenty of evidence to suspect that a fourth party was involved, in my opinion. This is mainly due to the lack of evidence against Philip Marshall. If the police cannot conclusively prove their own theory, why should they rule out all other theories? No matter how crazy those theories may sound to investigators, it is their responsibility to find the truth and bring justice to this tragedy. It is not their job to assume within hours that Marshall is guilty of a double murder suicide and then search for evidence to prove their theory, which is based on circumstantial evidence with no clear motive. Ballistics tests and DNA tests are expected shortly, but don't count on it, because it doesn't seem to matter for those who have concluded Philip Marshall is guilty of a double murder suicide. Am I the only one who believes the authorities are ignoring the possibilities of foul play? I doubt it, and I know for a fact I'm not. We will have to ask Sheriff Gary Coons for an interview to explain the actions of his officers. To secure the interview, we may need a resident living in Calaveras County, California, or one of the family members of Philip Marshall. Their reasons for ruling out foul play are very weak. Police cannot prove that Marshall fired the Glock 9mm, and the only fingerprints they have of Marshall do not conclusively prove anything. Where they say Marshall shot himself on the right side with his left hand, the gun inverted, it makes no sense. The tests only conclude that Philip Marshall could not be ruled out as the one who shot the gun. This does not mean he fired the gun. The fingerprints found on the gun were not on the trigger, but on the slider, which is used to cock the gun. A bullet was found in the chamber of the Glock, but the magazine was empty. The police finding no evidence of a struggle or forced entry does not mean Philip Marshall is guilty of murdering his two children. The police have already admitted that more than one door of the house was unlocked. So there is little need to look for forced entry when you already have established a means of entry without force. Isn't it possible a fourth party simply walked in through one of the unlocked doors? Video of the Marshall house shows how many doors there are in the 2 to 3 story home. There are quite a few. The ridiculous prepared media release by Sergeant Chris Hewitt concludes by stating they base their entire theory of a double murder suicide on the final findings of the investigators. Well, the final findings match the initial findings and their conclusions within hours of arriving at the Marshall house. If the purpose of this lengthy media release by Sergeant Chris Hewitt was to put conspiracy theories to rest, then in my opinion, you have failed, sir. Perhaps you should wait until ballistics test results are in your hands before you conclude anything. Do you seriously believe you could convict Philip Marshall of a double murder suicide in a court of law based on the evidence in the possession of your department? I challenge you to do so. I believe a jury will find Philip Marshall innocent based on your lack of evidence. As always, the truth resides in the court of public opinion. The bigger false flag may be due to Philip Marshall's stance on 911. He believed it was possible for the World Trade Center to be demolished by the impact of the jetliner and jet fuel. I do not. Marshall also believed this was a Bush Saudi operation. I believe the 9/11 conspiracy goes much further. Regardless of our differing views on 9/11, that shouldn't stop me or you from investigating the death of someone who understood 9/11 was an inside job.
I can never count the lies that I told. The times that I told another bigger lie will be coming home tonight. Many people run away to see if you care, to see if you were the truth said you'd always be there. Or truth is like a dime, maybe mine. Find it, watch the sun shining to get to the blinded. Greed lives inside of me, inside of my dream. It's a rock without a back. Out to the body of kings. I could be anything, but all I want to be is me. Liberty, democracy, republic, now we're living free. The bad economy, this what the bomb means, but we don't got no money. For the homeless on our streets, and money is an object to make me an object. I'm part of the problem, I'm part of the process. People losing hope when I look in the face. They don't want to do the dope, but it's harder to change. Something's wrong, so we write a new song. You try to let the people of it show them others a bomb. We've got a letter for the peace, we're not in everyone about the truth, so I'm inside of us. And plus, don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. Don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. How are people gonna pay the rent when a dollar ain't a dollar? Isn't worth 2 cents. 2 jobs to cover the bill. It's part-time, half-time for the minimum skills. Low wage, low income in. It's a 10th of the month. They can't pay rent. 3rd job for the broken poor. Price going up more than ever before. They make cuts, but they start at the bottom. Looking for a bonus at the top. They got a house in the hills. $1 million bill to kill free. We'll call it working the deal. Bugs in the phones. A world full of drones. The cameras in the bathroom. All of your homes. Global occupation. Replacing the nation. People on the front line trying to save them. And plus, don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. Don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. Don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. Don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. Concealed will be revealed. The sun is coming soon. In the darkness, I find my blind eyes, and all I ask of you. But don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. Don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. Don't give up on me. I won't give up on you. Don't give up on me. I won't give up on you.
Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is July 11th, 2017. I'll be joined with guest host Greg Fernandez Jr. And between the both of us, we're going to review the movie documentary called A Gray State by Eric Nelson. This is a documentary that Eric Nelson and his team put together relating to the David Crowley and the family murders, and the project called The Gray State. It was premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. The film, once again, is a documentary called A Gray State, not to be confused with the Gray State Project that David Crowley was working on, or Gray State The Rise, the documentary that David Crowley did. But this is called A Gray State, which is really just a documentary based on this whole events of the deaths of the family of 3 in Apple Valley, Minnesota. Is that a good way to summarize it, Greg?
Yeah, it's basically a documentary of the documentary and of the life of David Crowley, and more so, not really his life, but his death is kind of what it seems to really be focused on. I mean, this whole alt-right thing. The key word that I keep hearing is alt-right, alt-right, right-wing, you know. It's like, wait a minute. Those are the...
It's really pushing the envelope there on some of these reviews of the movie.
Yeah, and there's no facts to really back up any of this alt-right crap. So,
and the movie was the documentary that Eric Nelson directed. It was taking, I think it was up to 13,000 hours of different footage and audio and home movies and selfies, and and David Crowley seemed to film a lot at home all the time. Anything that came up, it seemed to film. So once they got a hold of all of this footage and video and photographs and video, they really went to town on making this movie, and really brought out some new things. Now, I haven't seen it myself, and neither have you, but it just came out. It was previewed in the Tribeca Film Festival. Now, lately, it was shown in the Nantucket Film Festival, and then I think next month it makes its premiere in the Australian Film Festival. Now, tonight's show topic will really be the reviews that we're seeing on this website called the Rotten Tomatoes Movie Review website. And the reason that we're dedicating this section tonight for this episode is there's only 5 reviews out there on this movie, and all I think were added in a 1 week time period. And they all say basically the same thing with a little different verbiage, and then nothing's been added since. And all the 5 reviewers give it 2 thumbs up, or in this case 100% really on the tomato meter, as this great documentary, but yet there's no poster on the movie, there's no information on it, the audience has it written in, there's no other comments, there's just 5 critics, and they say what a great movie it is. So tonight's episode will be basically on this, and what I'll do is I'll pull this up, Greg, and there's only the 5 reviews, and we're going to go through one at a time and basically bring them up. How does that sound for you?
Cool, sounds good. Yeah, I think people should, check out this site, and if they want to, start leaving comments. I think I might just leave a comment here in a day or two.
Yes, good idea. And the other thing too is reviewing these comments and reviewing these reviews. Keep in mind too is as many of us talk about the compromised media and the mass media as tools and slaves and basically working for the man. These reviews, as I read them, do not seem to be authentic reviews. They're still seem to be pushing a narrative. So for the listeners out there, when you watch this, leave comments yourself below this video when we publish it, because hopefully it'll open your eyes and ears when you read reviews in the future. Right up the bat, we'll start with Frank Scheck. Frank Scheck wrote a Gray State film review for the Tribeca Film Festival. Although several self-identified citizen investigators, he's referring to us here, by the way, attempted to prove that the family was murdered, the quote, credibility means nothing to me, one of them ironically comments. And that's a shot towards you, Greg, there. I believe
I was wondering who that was about.
That was exactly, I'll get to that too, because this is a good one to start with, because I know exactly what you meant when you said that, but he obviously took it the wrong way. It goes on to say the film makes its case methodically and persuasively. Nelson, who's produced such Werner Herzog documentaries such as Grizzly Man, Herzog returns the favor by serving as this film's executive producer. Clearly knows his way around obsessive personalities and Crowley, he's found a compelling textbook example of obsession descending into madness. And so right after that, Frank Scheck goes in and makes a couple, I wouldn't say condescending, but comments, and then really throws Crowley under the bus as an obsessive person here who has descended into madness. And that's a common theme on these reviews too, is painting, I would call this the David Crowley case, going down that path of the movie The Shining. The Stephen King movie The Shining is what I'm kind of referring to, is they're painting David Crowley into this person who's gone off the deep end. Werner Herzog is the executive producer of Eric Nelson's documentary about the mysterious death of an alt-right filmmaker and his family. So there we get the phrase alt-right right off the bat.
Right-wing media provocateur Alex Jones recently admitted in court that he's merely playing a character. So we're already here talking about Alex Jones. All of a sudden, the focus, an article that is supposed to be about David Crowley and this alt-right filmmaker who killed his family, all of a sudden it turns to Alex Jones. And they call Alex Jones someone who was associated with the right wing. Well, I don't believe there's any proof that Alex Jones is associated with the right wing. I don't believe Alex Jones, really gets into that, to the Democrat Republican thing. I think he's getting a lot of flack now because of his stance on Trump, but really, this has nothing to do with Alex Jones. It goes on again, talking about exploring the alt-right phenomenon through the prism of a conspiracy theory involving its subject's demise. A gray state in which Jones makes a brief appearance, provides timely political commentary, along with a fascinating true life crime tale. Here we are talking about an alt-right filmmaker, and then we move to Alex Jones. And I think that's a big problem, because what is the tie between Alex Jones and David Crowley? There are some, but they don't really go into that. They don't really mention how many times has Alex Jones had David Crowley on. I've only found maybe one, maybe two,
I think
maybe
twice. Once or twice, but that was about it. And Jones supported it along with a bunch of other folks in the alternative media. But in working with the Gray State and David Crowley, he was very prominent to ensure not to use Republican Democrat paradigm in any of his work. I mean that, and now what we're getting at the reviews is that all over again. The shoving the left side, right side, divide and conquer, and that was not Crowley's aim. I think from being a libertarian standpoint on this project, is to mainly open up and educate open up their eyes and educate the people. Not left-right paradigm, not right, left, alt-right and everything else, but the review right away goes into this Alex Jones connection and as the discrediting attempt.
Eric Nelson has also said he would consider David Crowley a libertarian, and I think we're going to find that too. It's like, where is this alt-right thing coming from? Like, why are these articles so slanted? I don't think that this movie is going to solve what really happened. But maybe I'm wrong. Wouldn't be the first time.
Now the self-identified citizen investigators, I think he's referring to you and I.
Why do you think that's us? That's so funny.
That is exactly because one of your quotes on your exchange with Sean Wright right at the beginning on an instant message was, you lose all credibility if you go down this road. And you said back to him, my credibility means nothing to me. I'm not out for how I'm viewed down the road. I'm out for the truth, is what you said.
Okay.
And that, I think, is what he's driving at here by saying how ironic it is. Now, I'd like to jump in here and opine personally that it's the same with me. So I agree with you, Greg, here that credibility for me on this case means nothing, as far as I'm not trying to do research into this case to be credible on the street or to have street cred or to look good or to look bad. It's to get the truth out there, irrelevant of the credibility and how it makes me look as a person, sheds me in a good or bad light. That's what you were referring to there, and that's what Sean Wright was so concerned about by saying if you jump in there you're going to lose street cred on the outside by delving into this case. And you said, I don't care about that.
Gotcha.
I want the truth to come out. So that's the whole point with investigators like what we have here on the Justice for David Crowley cases. It's the people that want the truth, irrelevant if they like it or not, if it sheds them in a good light or not. If it sheds them in a positive or negative light, we don't care about that. Is what this whole point is trying to be. We want the truth out there.
Right, and they're trying to kind of spin that
Correct.
by saying that the credibility, that I'm not worried about credibility because I don't have any. Or I mean, I'm reading this. I've read this in like several times, and I still don't know what the crap this guy is saying. I might just have to ask him.
Yeah, you certainly could. But yeah, the two featured in the film is us on the citizen investigators. Is who he's driving at there, and that's kind of a shot, an underhanded shot there towards us as not knowing what's going on.
We're going to go through some very, very difficult times.
Yes. The Bible says that it is going to be so bad that there is no time in history that is as bad as this time that's coming. And now you talk about the genocide that Hitler and his regime did. You join Stalin, Mussolini, and Hitler, and that is going to look like a Sunday school class in comparison to what Revelation says, that I think it was a third of the population of the world is going to be killed, and there's 3 ways they're going to kill them. If I had my Bible over here, I know that one was with death, but we can see all these things going on right now. They are happening. It's going on with war. People are dying with war. People are dying with vaccines. People are being poisoned. People are being killed. And Jesus even said, well, some of you were brought forward before judges and magistrates, But don't worry what you're going to say, for I'll give you the words to say. He said some of you be killed, some of you be thrown in prison. It's all happening. But this was just the beginning of birth pains in Matthew 24 and 25 and Luke 13 and all that, And, like I told you the last time we talked, I just started reading the Bible in jail, and it just changed my life. And it is, like it says, everything that is in the Bible is written for our instruction, to godliness, everything pertaining to life and godliness. Exactly, those are the exact words. And if we don't read the whole counsel of God from front to end, and we just learn how the Lord works and what we're supposed to do, we'll really find it out. We'll really know. And I hope that's where some of the people in the truth movement would come to the real truth of Christ. Because Satan, an old man once said, you know how Satan works? He'll mix up truth with lie, right? There's enough truth there, but a little bit of lie, just like leaven's the whole loaf. And so he said that it's like rat poison. If you look on the back of the bottle of a rat poison, and it actually does say that it is 99.995% nutritious and 0.005% like poison, cyanide, whatever it is. So that's how much healthy stuff is in there, but there was just enough to kill the rat.
What do you think their goal is? What is the purpose of being a Mason?
Well, I think I would say that probably 90% of them don't even really know what's going on. Yeah. That's what they say. Albert Pike wrote in that same book to the Masons of the 31st and the 30th degree. This is what we mean by what we say God. But to those feeble-minded, this is what we'll tell them what we say God is. So they don't even tell their own members unless you're invited out to Virginia to the council, the Masonic Lodge Council, when you stand before them. And that's where you receive your, I think, the 31st or 32nd or 33rd degree. That's the beginning stage of the whole denouncing Christ deal. There's a great article. I was killed over it. He was invited down there, and the Christian dentist was telling him to get out of it. And he didn't, and they flew him to Virginia. It's online. They flew into Virginia, and if I find a link, I'll email it to you. In Virginia is the Masonic Council. That's where you go when they invite you in to be the 33rd degree. That's where you go. And his whole testimony is on that. And it is, at the end, it is very, very good, because he turned to Christ and he walked away from the whole deal. But he was the one that what he didn't know until at that point. And then the Lord used it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you asked about their goal. I mean, if we could say we had the 10% out of the 90, obviously the swearing allegiance to Lucifer and every Masonic lodge in this world, what they teach was that Adam and Eve were held captive in the Garden of Eden by a vindictive God until Lucifer, the light bearer, came and showed them the truth and set them free.
Wow.
That's what they teach.
Okay.
No kidding. The biggest evangelical leader of all time is Billy Graham. And how old is that guy now? 200? He's not done yet. wait till he passes, dude. Wait till he passes. It is going to be bigger than Pope John Paul II.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And there was documents that came forward that Billy Graham was a Mason. See, they'll say, oh yeah, we accept Christians. But once you get in there, yeah, you can be a Christian, but you have to understand that you serve the same God as the Jews and the Muslims. That's what it's not, because they have another name for it. Ed Decker was who was the guy, Stanley Monteith of Liberty Radio. They exposed a lot of that stuff. Even I'll remember this other guy's name in a minute, but there's some really, really good videos out there that helped explain the founding fathers and what their goal was and what was really going on at that time. And then we learn why there were cornerstones laid for all these Masonic buildings and what they were really up to. And they want to dominate the whole world and set up God's kingdom. I think that's what they're doing.
Now,
But
when you say
Jesus,
God, it's
right?
they mean the devil.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so the main